It is said that one should keep one's allies within view, and one's enemies within reach. A valid statement. One must be able to read an ally's strengths so as to determine how best to use him. One must similarly be able to read an enemy's weaknesses so as to determine how best to defeat him. But what of friends? There is no accepted answer. Perhaps because true friendship is so exceedingly rare. But I have formulated my own. A friend need not be kept either within sight or within reach. A friend must be allowed the freedom to find and follow his own path. If one is fortunate, those paths will for a time join. But if the paths separate, it is comforting to know that a friend still graces the universe with his skills and his viewpoint and his presence. For if one is remembered by a friend, one is never truly gone.
What's going on, everybody? Apparently, hell has in fact froze it over because three guys, for the first time in a very long time, have had a chance to sit down and pump out an episode of Star Wars content, more specifically, Star Wars Wastelands content. It's really fun to be here tonight. Won't lie, I'm a little jittery. This one means a lot. This one hits home for sure. And by the way, let me just get this one out of the way right off the top. Viewer discretion is advised for everybody out there. If you've been a longtime listener of the show when it was on from 2015 to 2018, we greatly appreciate it. And if you're new, there's nothing wrong with that. Joining me, I was going to say as always, but again, first up, he is the host of the Bros Before Pros Twitch channel, Mr. Johnny. What's going on, man?
Oh, not anything. I'm trying to get a last-second drink in there before the intro started. Oh, it did not end well.
He's choking. Oh, we won't get through the intro.
Coke down the wrong pipe. But I guess that's the most appropriate thing that could happen during a Star Wars Wastelands intro. Sort of a $2 Burger King hooker knocking on my window.
Yeah. Oh, man. That was a night.
I feel sorry for anyone who hasn't been with us a long time trying to watch this. They're going to, like, half of the jokes are going to be like, huh? What?
Also joining us, man, myth, legend himself. I don't see the little version of Mondo around at the moment, but for those of you that get that one,
I think that might get us
those of you that don't, again, viewer discretion is advised. It's our good buddy Mondo. Welcome back, dude. Great to have you.
Hi. Hope all is well for everybody. It's good to be here in the comfort of my own home. That's important. Little Mondo, both literally and figuratively, will not be coming out tonight. Truth is, I haven't fed him since 2015. So he may or may not be with us. Or at least until I get the soundboard figured out to where I can resurrect him from the dead.
Oh, he may or may not be with us. So we're going to talk a lot of Star Wars tonight. A ton of Star Wars, in fact, such as what it was like covering the sequel trilogy as a podcaster compared to how we feel about it as fans. Force Friday, The Force Awakens, Rogue One, The Last Jedi, Solo, The Rise of Skywalker, The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, Kenobi, Battlefronts, Jedi Fallen Order, and more tonight. So strap yourselves in. It's going to be a long friggin' night. But I just want to go around the table and just discuss what it means to be here tonight and how this came together and why now. I want to start with Mondo.
Damn, why'd you come to me first? Like,
Three
this
to
is
the
like
wolves,
whenever
man.
you sit down at the Olive Garden and you say you're ready, but you're really not ready. So like you tell everybody, come to me last. Okay, listen, if anybody ever says come to me last, they weren't ready. They're still contemplating between at least 3 menu items. If you're fat like me, 5. Okay, it's just the truth.
Who hasn't been in the restaurant where they're with that person, Jade? And
Hey, buddy. I think there was something in your throat. I don't think you understood what you said there.
And they just can't decide what they want on the menu. It's like, okay, well, we just called them back over, and you still haven't decided yet. Decide, people.
Yeah. So, this is actually something that Sean has proposed several times over the last several years. Over the course of that time, we've had little not weird, I don't want to say weird, but like accompanying one-off things under different things and just kind of guesty appearances. And, I think, he brought this to me not that long ago, and, a lot can happen in a few years. Sometimes your mind gets in a different place. Sometimes, your feelings toward things change. And sometimes you're able to kind of look at things a little differently. So this was a great time, I felt like, to dive back in to do this, and I felt like the timing was right. I felt like we had spent enough time apart or away from Wastelands to kick it back up. And I think we had talked about something like this a couple years ago, if I recall. I believe we were at the height of the pandemic whenever we talked about it. So it would have been mid to late 2020. And, I think what we all kind of agreed on is when the timing felt right. And, when it comes to a feeling, when it comes to something like that, there's really never like a checkbox, right? You don't say like, well, in this year, on this month, on this day, if a hooker comes to my car at the Whataburger drive-thru, then I'll know it's fate. Sean brought this to me, and he said, "Hey, man, I'm thinking about this, and what do you think about it?" And I was like, "Man, that actually sounds really good. I'm in." And here we are, doing this. I think a cat is behind me.
Yeah. Oh, that was creepy as shit. Yeah. I think we've, with Mondo's permission, every single time, might I add, attempted to reshape and redo Star Wars Wastelands. Most recent one had Mondo involved in the first few episodes with a little joke segment that we were doing. And I think Johnny and I ultimately decided it's just name using that name without the three of us all involved. So we decided to bench the name and not bring it back unless the three of us were involved. And here we are tonight. Johnny, why now?
Because I was asked. I think that's the most Star Wars Wastelands appropriate answer I can think of. No, seriously. I mean, like you guys said, it's something that we did. It was such a big part of us for such a long time that it's always fun to bring it back. And God, I hate saying it, but it's nostalgic. I hate being a part of something that qualifies as nostalgia, but I guess we kind of do. We started this long enough ago now that nostalgia counts, and it's fun. It's always fun. It's never. If there's one thing I could say about all the years we did this, it was never boring. It was never rote. It was never routine. Part of that was because we flew by the seat of our pants pretty hardcore for a long stretch of time. The other part of it was that you never knew what was going to come out of this guy's mouth up here. So there's a 50% chance that there's going to be at least 5 minutes of silence in every episode because Mondo said something that has us both sitting there like, how do we respond to this? And then, of course, there was, things like hookers knocking on car windows in the middle of interviews with guests. It just, there was always something. It was always fun. And, if there's one thing that I can say, I've been involved in a lot of projects and a lot of things and a lot of shows, and sometimes it just feels routine. You get on, you talk about the stuff you have to talk about, and if you don't have that spark, that fun, that enjoyment, it gets a little routine. And, routine is not something you want in podcasting. It's boring. Nobody wants to watch that. Nobody wants to be a part of that. If there's one thing this is, it's not that as Mondo sits there pouring himself his second drink of the night. We know it's not going to be routine.
Yeah, I mean, hey, as someone who has YouTube as a part-time job on the side of his full-time job, it's nice to get away from what's normal once in a while and do something different and switch it up. And honestly, I think Star Wars is also in this kind of weird place right now that I think it'll be fun to dive into here in a second. It just felt like a good time to do it. Andor is almost over. That's not a show that we're going to be talking about tonight. I believe Mondo hasn't seen any of that. I don't even know if Johnny's seen any of that.
The first episode. Johnny's watched the same amount as he did when we talked about it last on. It was one of the Phantom Empire live shows.
I think so.
Or something specific. I don't remember. Either way, I watched like an episode and a half and stopped watching. I haven't gone back to it yet.
I feel like a seal.
Don't look like a seal.
So
you should see me naked, buddy.
Oh, there's a super chat. I was blind to that. Apologies.
It's because it came like when we were doing the intro, I think.
That's probably why.
The intro.
Talking Star Wars, over or under 66%. Taika's film happens and or get it. It gets executed. Do you just mean like over
under it happens?
Oh, boy. 66 is a tough number.
66 is a high number for films in this universe, so I'm going to take the under.
Yeah.
If you'd have gone 50-50, I maybe might have taken the over, but, under 66? No, definitely under 66.
I'm going to go under 66 as well.
I'm going to go under 66, mainly because you chose 66 and not 69. Missed opportunity. Shame on you.
Well, I mean, he's going for the Star Wars joke there. So, I get what you're saying, though. 69, always a fun number.
It's always better.
Zach says it was this podcast that eventually led to Mondo becoming the best man at my wedding.
That is a true fact. That is a true story. That's the sound. Those are the things. I hear those. I think of gerbils and chipmunks. I don't know why. I think there was like a PetSmart commercial, it was a Kia commercial, I think, that had that thing in there. The little bastards riding in a little Kia Soul. Y'all remember that? Y'all have Kias in Canada?
Yeah, we have Kias in Canada.
Remember what I said about random?
We definitely have Kias in Canada.
I said Kia, not keys. Just making sure we're on the same page. Key, like the car.
No, we don't actually have keys in Canada. It's all touchpad.
Oh, wow. How does that work?
I don't know. I'm not with it enough to try to get into that explanation. Let me ask you fellas this. Mondo actually was the one that brought this up. When we look back at specifically the movies that we covered on Wastelands, which would have been the four of the 5 that came out in the Disney era. Looking back at it, being a podcaster, did it affect your the way that you saw those movies at all? And how do you necessarily look at that now?
So I'm gonna lead. Because it was my question. Damn it. Not my question, but my thing. Not my thing, but guys, it's been a while since I've done this. And that's not the first time I've said that in the last couple of days. But the other time I didn't say it to God, just gonna shut up. At first it was weird because it wasn't the same experience throughout the whole trilogy. In the movies in between, like it wasn't the same experience, and it changed a little bit. But I do think it changed the experience as it went along. And what I mean by that is, with episode 7, right? We were at like the core of the hype, okay? Because it wasn't just us; it was the other groups of things changed. My face is not there anymore. That freaked me out. I thought I broke something. You can't be doing that to me, man. I'm like 4 drinks in, man. You gotta warn me before my face goes bye-bye. Okay? That's me. Well, no, that's Tommy. Damn, Tommy, you look ugly. So anyway,
See, this is the problem with doing a Mondo show in video. We can't break. It's just, like in the old days when Mondo said something so ridiculous, we just take the headphone off for a second and just have a moment, and nobody would notice. Now, everybody's going to notice.
Enjoy. But we were, because like it wasn't just our podcast, it was like the other podcasts that were a part of our network, and it was just a big group of hypeness that was going on, and there was so much of it, right? Like, I mean, we were getting plot notes and we were getting plot notes, and we were getting just different things that we were getting. We're getting hyped about. Like I remember when we got like the leak of like the packaging with Kylo Ren for like the merchandising inside of it, and like it just led to this whole like, oh man, that's awesome. And then I remember we went and saw the movie, and I remember most of us, not all of us, had like a very similar reaction leaving the theater. That was, I can't wait for the next one. I wish it was now. And then the hype kind of trickled away a little bit, obviously with things, right? But then, it kind of came back again. And we were fortunate that, we still had, stuff in between episode 8 to keep the hype train rolling. But, But as we went on, right, and being at the core of the hype also sort of brings on kind of a negative thing, because if you're at the core of the hype, you're at the core of the toxicity. And then when that started to happen, and I think that's when it really started to change things. And And it also doesn't help a whole lot that after, episode 7, there was a little not decisiveness. There was nothing decisive about that entire trilogy. Divisiveness, there was a little bit of divisiveness about it. And every movie that came out after that, there was just more and more and more and more. And kind of by the end of it, like, I know I'm jumping like all the way to the end, but I remember coming out of episode 9, thinking, thank God it's finally over. Like, and it wasn't just because of the show or the movies. It just wasn't because of that. It was because of the fan base. It was because of that toxicity that we had mentioned. It looks like Sean's about to tell us scary stories around a campfire. That was. You look like a ghost. Are you okay? Oh, yep. There it is. Oh, no. Oh, that's what it looks like when you come out of your mom at childbirth.
Oh my!
So that was a part of it, but I remember being so freaking excited though, like, and it was it was several years, right? But to flip the switch like that, but it wasn't like, it was like a knob, that we slowly turned. So yeah. Would anybody else like to take a squirt at it?
I think for me, I think you'd hit the nail on the head with The Force Awakens, which we're going to dive in to here not too long from now. I think a lot of people had similar reactions coming out of that movie, and why not? It's the first on-screen Star Wars movie we've seen in a decade. At times we thought we might not see another one. I have regrets about how I feel. I have really big regrets about how I feel about one of the films, and I have some minor regrets about another one. It's like you, when The Rise of Skywalker finally came out, it was kind of like, and like I knew everything that was going to happen going into it. A lot of people did. Leaks were everywhere. And I just kind of thought, wow, that if I could rewind the clock to 2015, even in 2019, I never would have thought, we would have been ending on that sort of a note with the fan base. And it was really, as someone who was creating content for most of those movies anyway, it was really hard to deal with. We had, I'm sure it was jarring for the whole fan base to deal with, and people doing other podcasts as well. I remember having a different opinion than other people on the network we were on, the Channel 1138 network we were on. And everybody's definitely entitled to their own opinion on things. But it just felt like, whether it was any of the podcasts on that network or any podcast elsewhere, it felt like people love Star Wars a lot, obviously. That's why you go to bat for it, regardless of what side of the fence you fall on any of these projects. But it felt like it became more of a turf war than it did actually either enjoying or properly dissecting what we got. It became like this fandom war, and I don't miss that time. And as we were leading up to the release of Halloween Ends here at Phantom Empire, I was telling everybody, like, it's coming. Like, it won't be as big as Star Wars, but it's coming. It's going to do the same thing. That's exactly what happened. And it's kind of, disappointing to see that on the Halloween front. But on the Star Wars front, I think it's in a better place today than it was 3 years ago. And I'm hopeful. But going back to the Super Chat, like the 66%, it would be really hard for me to say any Star Wars movies is coming, at an above 66% rate, simply because if you thought back in 2015, when The Force Awakens was getting ready to come out, or even after it had come out, that by 2022, you would be partway through what's going to be at least a 6-year break in between movies, I don't think anybody would have predicted that was going to happen.
Oh, absolutely not. And because, it looked like for a while that they were going to start popping out Star Wars movies like Activision does Call of Duty. Like, I mean, it looked like it was going to be an annual thing in some fashion, whether it was through trilogy, whether it was through Star Wars stories, whether it was through spin-off movies, like whatever. Like they were, um, they were almost committed to just force feeding us as much Star Wars as we could possibly handle. It's like they turned the Star Wars fan base into the human centipede, and we were getting Star Wars one way or another. And and I have another example for that, but I'll bring that up here shortly. But it has to do with that first Force Friday. And looking back, man, that was a sexy logo. Makes me want a candy cane. I don't know why. But like, I mean, if you guys remember, since the logo's up, I'll just go ahead and squirt right into this. It had like, it was so cool because we were seeing new Star Wars merchandise for the first time in years, right? I mean, we had kind of had new Star Wars merchandise, but a lot of it was, re-releases of characters that we had been buying for years, But this was the first time. But something happened, and we had kind of talked about it a little bit way back yonder when we talked about this originally, but they overdid it. And they overdid it because they oversaturated the market with their own product so bad. I mean, they had, honestly, they had Star Wars labeled everything. Salt and pepper shakers, plates, dishes, toilet paper. I'm surprised there wasn't condoms that were "I am not your father" by Trojan. Like I really did like I'm surprised we didn't have that, because there was everything. There was Star Wars wet wipes. You can wipe your beauty with some Star Wars. Like it was crazy. And yeah.
Star Wars peaches, that was a thing too.
Star Wars peaches, Star Wars oranges, Star Wars apples. There was even a Star Wars cucumber at one point. It was crazy. You can go down to the new fine art store and got the Han Blasted First set. Like, it was ridiculous. Oh, you got dirty.
Oh my God. Tommy B's in the studio with us here. You guys just don't see him yet. And he just linked us to Star Wars condoms. Oh man, Tommy, you bad
Facebook
boy.
ads are going to be really weird tomorrow, Tommy.
My Facebook ads are already weird.
Duh.
Johnny, how about you, man? Looking back at covering it as a podcaster compared to a fan, and then we'll dive into Force Friday.
It was hugely different. I think the biggest comparison to me is, as far as franchises go, is Marvel. I get to enjoy the Marvel movies as a fan, and not as a podcaster, because yes, okay, we'll talk about them as they come out when they're relevant to the different shows we do on the network, but they're not a focus, they're an also, and it allows me to watch them and enjoy them. I don't know things that are going to happen until they happen. I don't when we walked into episode 7, we knew the film, everything. There was no shocks, there was no surprises. We knew everything that was going to happen. I mean, sure, there were some lines that we didn't know, but the overall plot of the film, we could have done it. If we'd have not seen it, we could have faked a review that would have been passable because we knew so much about the actual film that came out. And that's not nearly as fun to me, as a person. I like the surprise. I like the secrets. And that's why, as we went through 8 and 9 and the other films after that, I tried to stay more aloof and more out of the loop on spoilers. And it's impossible when you're podcasting. It really, truly is. No matter what it is you're covering, you're going to learn things. Not always on purpose. Usually that's a slip of the tongue, an accidental line here or something there that you talk about that you don't realize is going to have that domino effect that's going to spoil the films for you. And that makes the viewing experience completely different. Now, granted, on the other side of the coin, being a podcaster throughout the sequel trilogy allowed for a lot more fun, and allowed a lot more experiences, throughout that. Like, we made 7, 8, we made 8, and was Rogue One and Han Solo. They were all films that we sort of had events tied to them in some way or another that came about because of the podcasting world. With 8 and Rogue One, we had the events we did with the Star Wars tabletop gamers locally, and those were fun. I need to get back out now that we're in a COVID smaller world. Now that things are back to normal, and get back into playing that. But obviously we had the the super pod around Han, which okay, was what it was, but it was still a lot of fun. And the people we met along the way, those are the most important ones. Ben, Jake, Ty, I could keep going. Those are all people that Zach, obviously, big one that I almost slipped through there. There's so many people we met because of the podcasting we were doing at the time in a community that was fun. Like the podcasters, I liked. I think like 99% of podcasters I've ever encountered in the Star Wars community are fine. I have no issues with any of them. There are some bad apples in the bunch, but there's some bad apples in every bunch. But it's the people, and it became unfortunate that the fan base took the turn it did, because eventually it became a point where you couldn't, if you said anything negative about anything, you became a pariah. If you weren't saying good things, you were evil, you're a horrible person, you're scum, you're awful, you're evil, you're disgusting. No, I just don't enjoy it. I'm glad you did, though. I didn't. And that became a problem somewhere along the way. And that's become more true in other fandoms as we've gone along. And, like you said, Halloween is a big example of that. That's not another one that, we got, the channel went head first into. And, it's unfortunate that fan bases have gone that way. Where if you say anything negative is an insult, even if it's, an opinion negative. If you liked it, great. I didn't.
There's extremists on both sides, though.
Absolutely.
There's if you say, I'm talking specifically when all this sort of happened, when episode 8 came out, and then there was some with Solo. There was even some with Rogue One, which we'll get to here in a bit. But yeah, it was unfortunate. It really did become more of like this fandom turf war than it was just enjoying Star Wars. And I really just urge everybody to, hey, if you enjoy whatever element of Star Wars, don't let anybody else ruin that for you. Continue to enjoy it. I'm watching the ILM Light and Magic documentary series right now on Disney Plus that I didn't even know about, and I'm friggin' loving it. Absolutely, just love diving into the behind the scenes stuff. If you're a comics fan, a novel fan, a game fan, a TV fan, an animated fan, a movie fan, I think the important thing to remember here is forget the true fan card nonsense, because that stuff is stupid, and just enjoy what you enjoy. You don't have to enjoy every element of Star Wars to enjoy Star Wars. I know I don't. I definitely got to pick and choose what I intake. I still haven't seen Star Wars Visions. I haven't seen all of Bad Batch season 1. And it's not because, I don't want to watch that stuff. It's, it's harder. We all have less time in our lives now. So you got to pick and choose what you watch. And, you got to be selective. And speaking of being selective, though, fellas, unless your name was Mondo, you had to be selective on Force Friday events. Because guess what? Shit was expensive and there wasn't much of it. But I just want to look back on that first Force Friday, guys, that had all the hype behind it. What do you guys remember that first Force Friday?
And like no shit, right? Like it was an event, but like I remember going to my local Toys R Us for like the opening, like the special opening they did. They closed the store just to open it again, specifically for Star Wars, and you could not purchase anything but Star Wars merchandise. Like if you were like, I'm going to slip this Power Ranger in there, they were like, no, you cannot do that. I am a giraffe, and I said no. But like you couldn't do that. Like it was awesome, and I remember like different stores were giving out different souvenirs of the event. Like it was a big commemorative thing. Like I remember I got like a little Lego piece somewhere of a kind, a thing. And it was really cool. Like it was like this really awesome thing, and it was so cool. Like looking at the merchandise, and I remember us even kind of talking about the like before, like that Wednesday before, like what we wanted out of Force Friday. Like I remember we were like, oh yeah, well, if I can get my hands on this, I'm gonna buy it. And we're like, I want, and I remember people were like, I want anything BB-8, or people, I want anything Kylo Ren, you know, and it was so fun. It was so cool to experience that. But like I said previously, they overdid it really bad. And it was almost immediately that the market got so flooded with stuff that it went from being this awesome, cool thing to you kind of were like, okay, Disney, enough. Like I'm literally seeing Star Wars everywhere I turn, and that would be a cool thing. That is a cool thing. But at the same time, it starts to feel, I hate to use this term, but I'm going to, and it's not moist. It's corporate greed. Because like we talked about, they had Star Wars everything. They had Star Wars on fruits, vegetables, obviously toys, household items. Like I still see, and it's got like the Star Wars Episode 7 labeling on it, the Kylo Ren, which was awesome by the way. But it has that, so I know it's from around that 2015 era. But like items that I didn't even know existed, Star Wars chopsticks, like you know, Star Wars silverware sets and serving platters and rice makers and crockpot. Now the crockpot's cool. I'll be honest with you, crockpot's pretty cool. But it's like so many different things. Like if they could slap their name on the side of it, like NASCAR. I mean, they took the NASCAR approach, man. They were slapping logos on the side of everything. I'm surprised they didn't, you know, sponsor a NASCAR. Like it was ridiculous to a point, and it kind of took the magic. Disney, get it? Magic away from the whole thing. It took the force away.
Yeah, I think like specifically pertaining to Force Friday stuff, there's a lot of stuff that was quite useless, and I don't think anybody was running out to their store to get. But they might have on that day just for the sake of getting it. I know on the first year, Johnny and I went to Toys R Us, struck out, and then went back the next morning to Walmart. And then we chose to go to that same Walmart the following year for, I don't know if it was called Force Friday the following year. I feel like they called it something else. And then Force Friday 2 was actually with The Last Jedi. But it just, I don't know. Nowadays, it's hard to do events like that and not have one or two dicks ruin it for everyone that's involved. And that's definitely what happened at the Toys R Us we were at. And like cool concepts, but probably don't ever want to participate in anything like that again. Not to be a Debbie Downer, but like it wouldn't do it for me. I don't know if the franchise is at a spot now where it's like, oh, we got this new movie coming, and you know, let's launch a Force Friday. I'm not saying it wouldn't happen. I'm just saying it'd be really hard to get back that success. Because I mean, whether anybody wants to admit it or not, Star Wars on the big screen was going through some diminishing returns, critically and financially. Not to the point where it was detrimental financially, that is, but it was. There was definitely a sink in value. I mentioned earlier, I don't think any of us would have thought in 2015 that in 2022 we'd be talking about a movie franchise that's going to go through at least 6 years without a movie. And I don't know if it matters what the reasons are for that. I think there's a ton of them. I will ask you this before we move on to The Force Awakens and bring on our first guest. The way I see it and where Star Wars is today, I really like what they're doing with TV. We're going to be talking about some of that TV later on. I'm not saying it all hits for me. It doesn't, but like I really enjoyed The Mandalorian. I liked parts of Book of Boba Fett. I loved the story of Obi-Wan Kenobi. There's elements of a lot of these things I like. And yet I still have that feel. I was talking to Ian the other day. Like I have that want and need for a Star Wars cinematic release. I want to go see Star Wars new Star Wars in a movie theater on a big screen. And I think, personally, my opinion, I think they're petrified to put out the next film because The Rise of Skywalker was not received well at all. Did good financially, but it was butchered. Solo obviously had its issues. The Last Jedi, it received super well critically that I don't think it gets enough credit for just how well the critics received that movie. And then obviously it was a fan base divider. I think they're really petrified of what they put out next. And I don't think they know what's coming next. That's what I believe. What do you guys think in terms of that? And I don't mean that in a negative standpoint. I think they should take their time before just throwing anything out there.
I think that people hold Star Wars to an unreasonable standard. I think that because Marvel is a successful, franchise that can pump out 2 films a year at minimum, plus TV shows, that Star Wars has to be able to do that. And in reality, it doesn't. Because cinematically, Star Wars has only succeeded at one thing. That's the Skywalker saga. And even that, in the back end, got awful and disjointed and not good, not fun to be part of anymore. And that's, what it is. The 2 times Star Wars has tried to venture out of that in film, but it didn't go over well. Rogue One wasn't as good as they hoped it would be, and Solo was just awful. And people still hold up Marvel as the paragon of this, when in reality, Marvel is a universe that has, a multitude of franchises in it. If you want to make the comparison, the Avengers movies are the Skywalker saga of Marvel. Everything else is sort of your anthology films. And it's not a fair comparison because these are characters that you build up in other individual projects that you then bring together for the big films. Star Wars has never done that. I mean, for lack of...
Well, they're doing it right now, just not on the big screen.
Yeah, they're doing it in television, and that's fine. But, there's still a big difference between television and cinema. We don't hold the Netflix characters to the same standards we hold the Netflix, the Marvel movies to. Yes, we shoehorn them in there and we make them part of the universe now. But, at the time, they were sort of, the redheaded stepchildren of the Marvel universe. They could make mention of the MCU, but they weren't part of it. You didn't have Daredevil show up in Infinity War. You didn't have any of the Defenders show up there, when in reality you could have. And they would have, at least some of those characters would have been, relevant to the story and being there. And it's, they weren't. The divide between television and movie is huge. And Star Wars has never gotten out of that. They've only done movies about the characters that they know. And when they had a chance to step out and do something different, they didn't. They did nothing. They decided, we're going to tell a Han Solo story. We're going to surround them with new characters, but the story is going to be about Han Solo because he's a character everyone loves. And, well, let's be honest, the reason we love Han Solo is because of the guy who's playing him. I don't want to say it's the Indiana Jones effect, but it sort of is. It's not the character that we love, it's the person playing him. And that was a very hard lesson for them to learn here, is that, the characters we love are, at least in part, because of the people playing them, not because of the characters themselves.
Apologies. Only on Wastelands. Inside joke that'll stay inside. I agree with some of that for sure. I'm not a big Marvel guy myself. Like, I love a lot of the Marvel movies, but I do think your comparison is pretty spot on. Like, I think there's Star Wars fans that wanted Star Wars to be Marvel with 2 or 3 movies every single year, and maybe that works if they would have sat down for 4 or 5 years and mapped something out and methodically planned it. And I think if anything you can say for certain now, it's pretty damn clear that this was not methodically planned in any way imaginable. These movies, I do have some beef to take with what Johnny said about Rogue One there, but we'll get to that in due time.
It's high beef, not accurate beef. I mean, we can go back to talk about it. At the time, you hated it. You've come around, but it's been 6-7 years that's taken you to come around. So
it's been 7 years. No, I don't even know if that's the way it's said, but that's the way I'm going to say it. It's funny that Johnny brought up Marvel, because I remember around, like, in between episode 7 and 8, and more so after episode 8, after the hacking of the story, people were a little aggravated that maybe they should have taken a more Marvel approach instead of diving in to these 3 trilogy movies. Maybe, and instead of doing these spin-off movies of young Han Solo and Rogue One, maybe they do spin-off movies introducing these new characters and giving these new characters backstories, and sort of setting it up sort of like Marvel did with the Avengers. And I remember that not, I wouldn't say a lot of people, but I remember hearing that. And people started bringing that up on multiple occasions. So, it's interesting that Johnny brought up Marvel, because I do remember those comparisons around the time of the film releases.
Mute monster. Apologies. Got a horrible report come across my phone. Anywho, though, let's take a trip back, guys. Let's take a trip back to December 2015, when Star Wars The Force Awakens was getting ready to come out. And joining us for the discussion on Star Wars The Force Awakens, Fandom Empire member Mr. Tommy B. Welcome to the show, buddy.
What's up?
Why are you holding a microphone like that? Like, you look like you're about to sing karaoke.
Take me.
No, I don't got energy to do that. We're not doing that.
Everybody's response to Tommy starting to sing. Let's go back to The Force Awakens here. What did everybody do for their Force Awakens event? Who did you go with? Let's try to keep this a little on the shorter side because we want to dive into the movie. But what was your event, Mondo?
I watched the movie.
Did you go? Did you go with a group of people or anything, or no? Just
it was just me and another person, and we went. watched it, ate popcorn, and it was actually funny. So Johnny mentioned because around episode 7, right? We basically knew the movie start to back before the movie came out. Like, I think we actually knew the damn movie before we bought our tickets to go see the said movie. And I remember sitting in the theater and it was all playing out like, huh, yep, I know all this. This is about to happen. And Johnny brought up a point that I wanted to touch on is he mentioned wanting to be surprised more going into the rest of the movies. And I did feel a bit envious watching people's reactions to things in the theater. Like things that I already knew. Like Han Solo getting Swiss cheesed. Like we knew that was going to happen. I think that was one of the first spoilers we actually talked about on Wastelands. But people's reaction in the theater, the nose, people crying. Yeah, there was a chick in my theater that was crying like she really thought she had a chance with Han Solo. It was weird. She wanted that. She wanted to ride Harrison Ford like a Bronco, if you know what I mean.
Maybe you just don't feel the emotion in that scene enough.
Well, but it's hard. It's a little harder to feel it though when you already know. Like when for months you've talked about it and you prepare and you've kind of rehearsed what you're supposed to feel when you get there. Like, I think it does change that a little bit. So now we watched the movie. Like I said, I ate some popcorn with Studio Movie Grill. It was a good time. I enjoyed it. It was, and I will say this, it was probably the most crowded I had ever seen that movie theater.
Was it a primo movie theater or was it just run of the mill Regal or whatever?
I don't know. In the Studio Movie Grills, they've got I don't even know if they're still around. You go in, you order food. It was one of the first around here that had like a full dine-in service, more like a gourmet menu. For a while, it was kind of more of like an uppity movie theater, I guess you could say. Had a kind of a cool lobby with neon lighting. Some of them kind of looked like you were about to get a lamp danced by a midget. It was pretty cool. Just whatever. It was cool. It was a good experience. Look, it's an experience. I don't think, there have been other movies that have come out. Again, Johnny mentioned Marvel earlier. Some of the Marvel movies have sort of kind of come close to that, right? With the experience and the people and stuff. But I don't think, at least with the hype level that we had for episode 7, I don't think a movie has come close, or it's come close, but I don't think it's eclipsed that.
That's fair. Johnny, what kind of theater did you catch this big release at? Anything special? Did you go and see it with Sean?
Yeah, you did. We didn't do anything too special for that one. It was at dinner with a bunch of us, and then went to the movie for that one. So yeah, it was just a pretty generic-ish one for us. The later ones we did more stuff for, but for the first one we just
Well, so
it was a pretty generic one.
Vivid details, yeah, like holy shit.
So, Talking Star Wars mentioned that they went and saw it by themselves for their first viewing. Then a week later, pretended like I hadn't seen it. Took their best friend, and she was shocked when Kylo was revealed to be the grandson. Ty watched the Legacy of the Force cast and crew. Mentioned his first reaction was underwhelming. Thought Han's death that we previously talked about was poorly done and executed. However, was excited to see where Rey and Kylo's story was going, and I agree with that. I think that that story arc was one of the one of the most exciting things leading into episode 8 coming out of episode 7. And I remember walking back to the car in the back of the lot thinking, man, I can't wait to see what happens. Like, oh, I wish it was now. Why do we have to wait? And at that time, if I remember correctly, episode 7 came out in December, and episode 8 was supposed to come out, I believe, May. So like a year and a half, after, not even a year and a half, and then it got delayed again. So we came out of that thinking we only had, X amount of months. I'm not even going to try to do math, y'all. I've had like 7 shots of apple whiskey, and it ain't happening. Okay. But yeah, it was good times.
Yeah, it was supposed to be a year and a half wait between episode 7 and episode 8, with Rogue One splitting it, and it did get delayed. And I seem to remember a set of events that happened when we went to see The Force Awakens. Johnny's being a little modest, but
Was it a hooker? Tell me it was a hooker.
we went out to dinner. There were 6 of us, and we had just like this horrible waitress who was incredibly rude to us.
Was that the mustard on the table?
The mayonnaise on the table.
Mustard, mayonnaise, they're both kind of gross if you're not.
Like the whole night, she was super rude to us. Probably some of the worst customer service I've ever gotten in my life. And I had a side of mayonnaise at one point, and so as we were leaving, I tipped the mayonnaise thing upside down and walked out. And then we proceeded to go see the movie.
You were an asshole.
Were? Thank you. No, it was I enjoyed it. I honestly, looking back at it, I probably had more fun on that experience on that night than any of the other ones. It just hit. It was thoroughly enjoyable. Now to get into the movie, though. How did you feel about the movie when you first saw it? Can you remember what your recency bias was? And how do you feel about it now?
Honestly, so I remember coming out of it, like I mentioned, like, I can't wait for more, man. We need more. I can't wait, that year and a half is going to go by so freaking slow, yada, 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 right? And I remember, you gotta stop doing that. Also, I like something about this particular logo makes it look very like, I don't know, prequel trilogy, and I kind of like it. I don't know what it is, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. I still think episode 7 is my favorite of the trilogy. I still probably like it about as much as I did when it first came out. There are a lot of aspects of that film, and I'm like, yeah, give me more. And then they didn't give me any more. It was actually disappointing. But, if you changed the E at the end of episode to an A, it would be episoda. Just notice that. Be delicious. Somebody please jump in.
I mean, for me, the movie, it was very high on my list, and it still is. I don't think there's much has changed in that. I mean, yes, sure, a lot of it was nostalgia factor because it was so very much like the original trilogy, but that's fine. It was, I don't want to say it was a new world, but, it was a new look into an old world. And it was to me, much better than, the prequels that had come before. I mean, sure, you had every, but, that one was a 40-minute great film after 2.5 movies of dog shit. But, that's a different issue altogether. So, for me, it captured so many great things. It captured the nostalgia. It was a J.J. Abrams movie at the height of his peak popularity, and it had everything going for it and very little going against it. So I think coming out of it, I think I had it ranked as like my number 3 Star Wars movie, and it's probably still there. I don't think anything's displaced it, and I don't think that time passing has changed it. Might maybe knock it down to 4, but it's still a top tier Star Wars film.
The Force Awakens is easily my favorite of all the films that have come out of the Disney era. I didn't go into what my viewing experience, but for the first 3 Disney films, I drove the state over a couple hours or so worth at that point, and caught it with my best friend from high school, and such. Ended up being the best man at my wedding, and it was great viewing experience for those films. Again, this is easily my top film of that era. Yeah, I was hooked. I was hooked in the trilogy in the aftermath of catching The Force Awakens. I wish it held up for me personally, but we're not going to get into all that. The A plot, the B plot, everything we had going on, I had high hopes for it, and I was beyond excited. I remember this was a time where I started before it, actually, but this is when we really wow, what a time to be a Star Wars fan. Right? Yeah, what a time to be a Star Wars fan. Really wearing those rainbow glasses and all that groovy stuff, right? Yeah.
So I remember coming out of that movie theater, standing in like a 6-person semicircle, freezing, and just all of us started talking. And the general consensus from everybody at that time, again, I'm someone who believes in recency bias. I think everybody should when it comes to your entertainment products. Because a lot of people that night said that The Force Awakens was probably the best Star Wars movie ever made. And I remember feeling very conflicted about those words coming out of my mouth, because it did, at least on that night. Because I hold The Empire Strikes Back very, very highly. And I can honestly say we're 7 years removed from that movie almost. And for me, it's far and away the best of the 5 movies that came out in the Disney era. When you look at like specifically the story anyway. And it's probably my 3rd favorite Star Wars movie even today. There's so much about that movie that I really, really enjoy. I don't necessarily like the fact that we don't really get any of Luke Skywalker, and yet they found a way to make the story of the movie about Luke Skywalker. So I thought that was intriguing. Obviously, the big chicken nugget that was out there was Harrison Ford returning as Han Solo after all this time. That didn't disappoint. Adam Driver didn't disappoint. The Force Awakens is an extremely quick-moving movie. I think its run time's like 2 hours and 14 minutes, but it feels like a 90-minute movie. As soon as that movie starts, it just doesn't really slow down. You're just on this constant, race car ride, if you will, but without cautions. You just keep going until the end of the movie. Looking back at it now, though, 7 years later, I don't think it's the level of a Revenge of the Sith, and I think Empire Strikes Back is the greatest movie ever made. So looking at it as a movie in general and looking at it as a Star Wars movie can be different things at times, but I still have really good feelings about The Force Awakens. I love the score to the movie. Mondo. They killed it. I enjoyed the cast performances. I I don't know if they could have hit it out of the park more than they did with that first movie in terms of appealing to a general audience. They really did do about as good as I think they could have done, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, but in a way, we almost set ourselves up for failure, though. Some of us, anyway, with the expectations that we could have just drawn on from that point. I mean, hindsight is 2020, right? But it's just when I think back to the rose-colored glasses or rainbow-colored glasses or whatever, it's like, yeah, I'm thinking a little bit too hopeful at this point for the future of Star Wars.
Well, I think part of that kind of became a thing because we all tried, we all came out of episode 7, right? And after we disassembled from our semicircles and we got back on, oh my God, you did it again! And we reassembled into Wastelands in various round tables, and we all started to mentally try to write the movie for episode 8. And we hadn't even opened our Christmas gifts yet. And we had already all pretty much had an idea, episode 8's going to be like this. We're going to get this. We're going to get that. This is going to happen. Snoke is going to be the biggest badass in Star Wars history. All these different things were happening. And Rey's going to be Luke Skywalker's long lost daughter. Or, just all of these, different things. And I remember people, they were sold on that idea. They were like, I figured out the movie. Let's go on to episode 9. We've already got episode 8 figured out. Boy.
Truth is, they didn't even have it figured out.
Were we all wrong?
Rey's
Ain't that the damn truth?
Kenobi's granddaughter. Rey ends up being Palpatine's granddaughter. And this isn't just from the fandom. This is straight, this is straight from Daisy Ridley's mouth recently. And it's like, yeah, okay, yeah. You really had no idea where you were going with that. You were just going on what felt right at the time.
And I think that you saw that, right? Because and we'll get into this later on as well, but there was just so much of everything that was so disconnected in those films, and we'll get to that, but and I say that because what you're saying is completely, it's apparent, it's obvious, but yeah, no, I think Tommy hit it right on the head when he said we set up expectations and we set ourselves up to fail, and that was one of the biggest ways I feel like.
To this day, I mean, we're not talking about this, but I think I'm going to miss that segment, so I'll just say it now. The Last Jedi, in my opinion, holds up as a wonderful film with some very powerful scenes. Some of my favorite scenes throughout, all of the Star Wars films. It's just, as a movie in that trilogy that was set up by The Force Awakens, it didn't work for me. And that's my own fault. Because I latched onto the fandom was swirling. Lots of theories out there, lots of fun theories, very far removed from what we actually ended up getting, we might say. Hell, to this day, one of folks' biggest concerns is that, Luke Skywalker's supposed to be the picture perfect hero, yada yada, this and that. Look, I would have much rather had this one fan theory from back then that at the end of the film, Luke Skywalker actually ends up being like a secret dark side agent or something like that. I would have loved to have seen Luke Skywalker walking off screen with a red lightsaber or something like that. much more than what we ended up getting. But that's just me.
Can I say something? And I've never noticed this until this moment.
I don't know. Can you say something?
Tommy looks like the white Snoop Dogg.
Sorry, we have a situation
Thanks.
going on over here. I don't know how much I'm going to have to step away or not.
I got,
Okay, so
I don't even remember what the question is anymore.
well, Tommy's not on. I think Tommy's off of here after The Force Awakens.
In general principle, I don't even remember what the topic was anymore.
But I think he was just chiming in on The Last Jedi a bit. And I thought that his points, for the most part, are pretty spot on. Ty also said in the chat he disagrees. Rogue One is the best of the Disney, then Solo, The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, The Rise of Skywalker. All are the same degree of, well, it's Star Wars, so good for them, but I don't want to see repeat viewings in anytime in the near future.
I'll respond to that because depending on how long we go and how long we think Rogue One will be, I would stick for that. Rogue One for me, fantastic. I've loved the film since it dropped. I had a Rogue One poster for a while. Actually, when all this was dropping, the wife and I lived in our first apartment together. We just bought our first house a few months ago. One bedroom apartment. I think I had like 3 Star Wars posters in our bedroom. Rogue One was one of them. Still a perfect choice. That film really, really held up for me so I would definitely say, Ty, maybe I should reconsider that a little bit. But my order would be very close to yours. Rogue One could potentially top Force Awakens. It'd be close no matter what. And then Solo, because that is a film I really enjoyed as well.
So before we move on to Rogue One here, and I do have another Force Awakens question for everybody. I agree with what Ty's saying here. So for me, I have like 2 different viewpoints on this. The Force Awakens is my favorite Star Wars movie of the 5 new Star Wars movies. But if you were to rate these just as movies in general and not just Star Wars movies like we do over on the Overlook Drive-In on the channel, I don't think there's a better made movie than Rogue One out of the 5 that have come out. I think Rogue One is far and away the best made cinematic movie. And in a few minutes, I'm going to talk about a regret that I have. And we've kind of been actually alluding to some of the stuff of how we were setting ourselves up for these movies. Not just us, but I think a lot of people need to take some time and be honest of how much, their point of view on certain things might have changed their viewing experience going in either prior or after. The Force Awakens, guys. Let's go around the table on this one. Give me your favorite character in that movie and your favorite moment. I'm going to start with Johnny.
Oh, man. Wow. Oh, that's a tough one because I'll admit I haven't watched it in a while. But looking back in my way back glasses, like my favorite character in the movie was probably it's gonna be like a cheap answer, but it's Han Solo. I think that was probably the most pure Han Solo of all of the Han Solo performances because it was the most just Harrison having fun of all the Han performances. And there were a lot of great sequences in there, the Rathtars, the Ganja gang. That's not how the Force works. All of those different Han-isms.
Hang on. Did you just call them the Ganja gang?
I did call them the Ganja gang.
A Ganja club?
Yeah, but I call them the Ganja gang because I think it just sounds funny.
Ganja gang.
I think you've been hanging out with Snoop Tom over here just a little too much.
I just like the sound of Ganja Gang better. It just sounds funnier to me.
Yeah.
And again, we had.
I
the
wonder
Snoop Dogg
why.
a minute ago. Like, excuse me, Snoop Tommy Tom, Devin. But
Favorite moment?
favorite moment? Oh God, that is really hard to pick. I guess probably the escape from Jakku in the Falcon. When you're flying through the down destroyer and all of that stuff, and seeing the Falcon again, and it being called a piece of crap, and all those other little moments in that escape from Jakku.
Mondo, how about you, man? Favorite character and favorite moment?
Whew, man. So that is a tough one, because I like quite a few of the characters in that movie. But I'm probably gonna go with Rey. I really liked the way that they were setting her up as this. She had no idea what she was or what she was capable of. She had ideas that she was something more than what she was. And honestly, that's a pretty cool metaphor to life, if you really kind of think about it. Not to get all philosophical on y'all, but I thought that's pretty cool. What is that, Jar? Is that Twix?
It's the most Canadian of chocolate bars. It's a coffee crisp.
Oh, okay. Gonna ask if it was the left or the right. Anyway, but episode 7, Force Awakens. Here we go. My favorite scene in the film, though, and this I feel like is something that isn't talked about enough, but I wish it was when Finn takes his hand and wipes the blood on the helmet. That is, to me, one of the coolest moments in the whole trilogy. And it really sucks you get it within the first 8 minutes of the trilogy. But and earlier when I alluded to they gave me something I really loved and I never got it again, that was that moment. I was like, oh my gosh, that is so cool. That was what was even cooler were the merchandise that came out afterwards, like the Black Series figures and the actual I actually have a die-cast helmet somewhere in this apartment that has the blood smeared on it, and it's just such a cool look. And it was kind of something. I felt like it sort of brought a bit of an edge to Star Wars that we hadn't necessarily seen before.
I dug that. That whole opening sequence was good. Sorry, got all sorts of things over here.
Looking back on that, before we move off that particular moment, can I point out the irony that it's Finn, or that it's Finn's best friend that gets shot by Poe, who basically, in my mind, we're talking about this, and in my head, I'm seeing the captain from the Tom Hanks movie. I am your best friend now. Just shooting the other guy. Just in my head, that's all I can see.
Tommy, favorite character, favorite moment?
It's a tough call. We all know why Rey. And I don't know if she would really win out. Finn was really set up to do some great stuff. And in my opinion, we just didn't really get that as much.
Movie?
Yeah, I feel that it's pretty fair to say that we care less for Finn in The Last Jedi, and by The Rise of Skywalker, he's not even a B plot anymore. Finn is a Z plot. It sucks. In my opinion, they did John Boyega dirty, but it's not all against the actor. It's the shitty behind the scenes. Anyway, we're not talking the whole negativities of the trilogy right this minute. Favorite moment. I remember being on a stream with maybe the three of you and saying this, and I got some shit for it, but I stand by it to this day. The death of Han Solo remains my favorite scene of that movie. I thought it was wonderfully executed. There was, here he is. Here it fucking is, bitch. Giving me all the shit. Don't matter. We're in 2022. It might as well be 20 whatever this fucking year. Yeah. Woo, woo, woo.
All right, first of all, that booing soundboard sounds like donkeys fucking. Okay. Like, I didn't know. And honestly, at one point, I thought you dubbed Johnny booing.
Apologies. I know it's not great that I'm like half paying attention here, but the situation's pretty serious, so I got to monitor it. For me, I go back and forth. Han Solo or Kylo Ren. It's one of those two. I mean, their relationship really makes the movie, and then we get introduced to Rey's character, and we know the MacGuffin's Luke Skywalker. I don't know if I know which one I like better, guys. Like, I think for the longest time, it was like, hey, I like Han Solo the best in The Force Awakens because it's Harrison Ford returning as Han Solo. It's, as Johnny said, it's kind of a little bit of a cop-out because it's just so easy to point to that. But when you look at what Adam Driver does with that character in that movie, and a lot of it behind a mask, it's hard to not really just go, wow. And I don't know if anybody's seen the script for the movie, but I'm not saying he made, chicken salad out of chicken shit. I'm not trying to be that critical at all. I just think Adam Driver was really good, acting wise and physicality. Like, my favorite scene in that movie is the lightsaber duels. Kylo against Finn and Rey. I think there's big story building elements during those duels. And obviously some unintentional ones, like people have pointed out that Rey at times handles her lightsaber like Palpatine, which makes some sense since she's the daughter of a Palpatine clone. But at that time, as they were filming that, they did not know that. They were of the opinion that she was either going to be Obi-Wan Kenobi's granddaughter or nobody at all.
Wait, you mean they didn't have a full trilogy planned out when they started this thing? What?
Shocker. But yeah, no, I really dig Kylo Ren. Kylo Ren resonates with me a lot. So The Force Awakens, I have fond memories of it, and I'll probably end up watching it again soon. Anybody have final thoughts on The Force Awakens before we move on?
It was okay.
Yes, clearly Ty watched a different movie than we did. Harrison Ford phoning it in? What?
Yeah.
I think that was Indy 4.
Oh,
Return of the Jedi.
I can't quite say I would agree.
I'll say this. Indy 4, I paid too much for my ticket.
Wow. You actually paid for a ticket?
No, that's the whole point.
Oh.
Has Mondo forgotten that story? Sean and I show up at the at the time. There's 4 of us, I think. I think Kelly was with us for that one.
He might have been. I don't know. I haven't talked to that guy in like a year and a half. So,
like, we show up at the theater and there's this dude just handing out tickets because it's the Rocky Horror thing to do. I don't know, but he's just handing out free tickets to the movie.
Cool. I mean, the movie blew, right?
Totally,
And I still paid too much to see it.
We totally lied to the news crew that filmed our.
That was the awkward part. We come out of this movie and we're both like inside the theater. We're talking like it's like, oh, that stunk. That was not good. And then you walk out and there's this reporter with a camera and the spotlight, and it's like, can we ask you a few questions about the movie? And it's like, I don't want to say no because, I'm going to be on television. I'm, awesome. But I don't know if I have anything nice to say. So we just ham-fisted a bunch of things, like to the point that when they asked, what was your favorite part? I just said the snake, because what else was I going to pick?
I totally agree that sometimes you can see a movie and think you paid too much for it, even if you spend nothing on the ticket because you still paid attention.
And snacks at the snack bar. I enjoyed the snacks.
I didn't hate Indiana Jones 4 until we got to the final scene with the Crystal Skull. I was like, oh, this is actually pretty cool. Like, it's decent. At the time, I grew up watching Shia LaBeouf through shows like Even Stevens, and so I was familiar with him as an actor, and it was really exciting. I'm like, heck yeah, man, this dude I know or dude I've been watching is in a show that or a movie that I really like. So I didn't have a problem with that. I know a lot of people did. I didn't. Then we got to the alien scene, and I'm like, what the is that? Like, I don't understand what we're doing, but okay.
As soon as the MacGuffin was revealed as actually being aliens, like you see Crystal Skull, and it's like, okay, this could be. Oh, it's an actual alien skull. Oh no, mistakes were made.
All right, well, let's shift gears to the movie that came out 1 year after The Force Awakens was released, Rogue One, a Star Wars story. I still hate that title. Just call the fucking.
I remember when nobody could fucking spell rogue. They kept putting Rogue, Rouge.
Hey, I feel attacked. Fuck you.
I'm a Canadian. I didn't have problems with it because, I can spell. And rouge is a French word, so I had to learn it at a very young age.
Rouge One. No, Rogue One came out, and I want to.
Which is funny because every time somebody called it Rouge One, I just in my head, no, that's Luke Skywalker.
I want to talk for a moment about a big regret I have with this movie.
Uh-oh, here we go.
So I went in to see this movie, and I think the problem was we came off the high of The Force Awakens, and my mindset was and Mondo kind of brought this up earlier, was, oh my God, I just want to get to episode 8. And I already have in my head what I want to see in episode 8. And I know how I would like to see it go. And so you get looking forward to that movie and not necessarily focused on the next one that's coming, which in fact has nothing to do with The Force Awakens, despite general audience members being confused by that. A lot of them, in fact. Rogue One, for me at that time, was never going to resonate with me at all. Simply because I was so addicted to the story that The Force Awakens had set up that I was already looking ahead at that point. I think it had already been delayed to the December. So I was already looking a year ahead instead of looking at the movie that we were going to see. Look, I'm someone that likes force powers. I like to see Jedi. I like to see Sith. That does it for me. I like to see badass lightsaber battles. That's the thing I like most in Star Wars. So Rogue One was already behind the 8 ball for me. And I went in and I seen that movie with an incredibly narrow mind. And I didn't appreciate it. I didn't appreciate it for what it is today. I didn't appreciate it for what it was then. And I think one of the there's reasons I didn't, for sure, but like when I look back at it today and I talk about like the cinematography, I don't think the cinematography is better in any other Star Wars film in the Disney era than in Rogue One. That is such a beautifully shot film, and we're seeing some more of that with Andor right now. And they just did a really fucking good job with it. Mondo, you seen Rogue One recently. Maybe touch on that when you jump into the discussion. I think you and Zach seen it. But honestly, I ran into the same problem I think a lot of fans did with some of these movies. is I went in with some preconceived notions and didn't let the movie, sort of digest for what it was. And now I gotta say, as a movie, not necessarily as a Star Wars movie, but as a movie, I think it's the best of the bunch. And as a Star Wars movie, it's my second favorite one of the Disney era. I wish I could go back and open my mind more to be ready to receive that movie, because I definitely wasn't back then. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah, you mentioned that Zach and I had the opportunity to see Rogue One um, recently back in cinema in IMAX, and that's how you know Disney has balls the size of the Epcot ball. When they charge you money that you work for, real money, dollar bills, so they can promote to you a show that they're making. And that's pretty much what the whole thing was. It was, hey, we have this thing coming out. You should come pay us money to get ready for it. And it was honestly, I found, and this was probably the first time I had seen Rogue One since its release. I'm not really big on. I like to watch new movies. I don't necessarily like to watch the same movies over and over again. So this was the first time I'd seen it since release, and I found a new appreciation for it. Visually, it was fantastic. I was like, holy cow, how did I not appreciate this when I had it? Every man ever. I will say Felicity Jones, her acting, at times felt a little flatter than a weasel on the interstate. But,
No, she's the biggest problem of that movie for me, even today. I don't think, Mondo, you've seen none of Andor, correct?
I have seen the first 3 episodes, or
Okay.
episodes.
So I look back at that movie, and I mean, we could dissect what they could have done differently forever, but like, I would never have known until I actually sat down and watched Andor and looked back at Rogue One and gone, hey, I'm not saying cut the character out, but I think if maybe a little more attention's paid to Cassian's character in that movie compared to Felicity Jones' character, I think it's maybe goes a little better. Yeah, I think he's just a better performer, in my opinion.
Well, a better performer, but they also built him a much better backstory, and you're seeing that in Andor. And I mentioned to Zach as we were watching those episodes, because you see him do certain things like early on, and you're like, holy shit, like that guy is jacked up. But he mentioned some of that in Rogue One. He mentions his past, and he talks about that. So it's not too surprising. It's surprising he took it as far as he did. You know what I'm saying? But no, like overall, like I came out of that movie and I was like, wow, man, why did I not appreciate this film as much as I did? And I think I kind of know why, though. I don't know if I can see my hands. We talked about Force Friday, and we talked about the second event, and I remember when some of the merchandise came out for Rogue One, right? The packaging was really cool. I believe it had the shock troopers on it, or the dark troopers, whatever they were called. They were black. That sounded racist. I didn't mean it to be racist, but that's just what they were. And it was really cool. Like, it had like that bluish, grayish packaging. Really awesome packaging. But yeah, but darker. A little bit. Like more of a bluish haze. And I remember like a lot of the merchandise that came out for that second event, which Sean's right, I don't think it was called Force Friday 2. It was something different. But it was all like the exact same crap we saw a year prior, just painted up and packaged differently. Like it was pretty much the exact same type of sets. So for episode 7, we got a speeder bike, and it was themed after episode 7. It was black and red. It looked really cool. And then when Rogue One came out, it was a speeder bike, but it was modeled after Rebels. So it was like I said, it was like the same idea, just done up differently. And for me, this is going to sound really dumb, but it's also me, so I hope you're sitting down for this. I kind of took that as like this weird sign that, oh, they're phoning this whole movie in. Like, they can't even come up with the original merchandise for this thing. Like, this is a cash grab from start to finish. And, you know, we had kind of talked about it on the podcast a little bit prior to it. And I kind of went in, I went into the movie, it was probably as narrow-minded as Hank Hill's urethra. Okay? Like, it was not good. And, you know, halfway through the movie, I dropped my nachos. It was a whole ordeal. It was a whole thing. Bad experience from start to finish. But
Did you cry over the dropped nachos?
dude, if you pay $12 for some nachos and them sons of bitches hit the fucking floor, you're gonna cry too. Okay? All right? And it was my off pay week too, man. I had to make that money stretch. But anyway, yeah, no, it was good times, man. It was like, looking back on it though, it was a good time. I mean, I know the nacho spell was kind of sucked, but it was a better time watching it the second time and not dropping my nachos. But also getting a better appreciation for it. And I know we're not too Solo yet, but it kind of makes me want to go back and rewatch Solo. Because I haven't seen it since watching it in the movie theater as well. But I enjoyed Solo. So I kind of want to go back and watch that again to see if I get a similar effect.
Johnny, how do we feel about Rogue One now, and how'd you feel then?
I mean, torn, I guess, in both ways, because I didn't quite have the expectations for this one, because it was, though, of all of the stories they could have told, this one I sort of think was the worst, because it was the most predetermined story they could have possibly told. You know, like there was no way, there was no surprises to be had. You know, everything that happened was sort of in rote fashion. You know, we knew that they were going to get the Death Star plans and that they were probably going to die in the process of doing it, because these are characters we never hear from again and never hear about again. So it's safe to assume that they were not going to survive. You know, this was...
I do think we got to give Disney and Lucasfilm some kudos for killing them off, though, because we did hear at one point it was on the table where they all live.
Yeah.
It feels very Disney to an extent at times, old Disney anyway. And they didn't do that. So I was kind of the category of, I wanted everybody to die, thought that was the right thing to do. And I was really worried that they weren't going to go that route.
I think part of the problem was that it confirmed so early in the process. I mean, didn't Donnie Yen spoil it like a year before the movie even came out?
No, it was the guy that played, man, what the hell is his name in the movie?
It's Donnie Yen.
No, it wasn't Donnie Yen that spoiled it. It was the other guy that spoiled it at Star Wars Celebration. He spoiled the fact that his character dies.
I'm sure it was Donnie Yen.
No, it's the other guy that's hanging out. Is it Baze? Is Baze the guy he's with?
Baze is the guy he's with, but I'm fairly certain it was Donnie Yen that said it.
No, it definitely. Well, and if you're talking about the Star Wars Celebration thing, it was not Donnie Yen. I remember everybody just looking down at that actor, being like, "Dude, shut up! Like, get the microphone from this guy." And it was all over the internet after that.
But either way, you know, it was so early in the process that we knew that they were going to die. I mean, I had sort of assumed that it was going to happen that way, but it was... Yeah, no, it was Donnie Yen. I just Googled it. Vanity Fair article. So it's Donnie Yen from 2016.
Well, it wasn't Donnie Yen for the celebration thing, but that's another point. What did Donnie Yen spoil that they all die?
Everything we learned from the Star Wars panel at Celebration.
Anyway, we could be at this all night. How do you feel about it today?
I mean, it was a good film. I never had issues with the film. You know, I mean, yes, we sort of, Felicity Jones was not the choice to star in this film. Like, she was sort of the hot property at the time, and I don't even know why. You know, I actually looked up her IMDb real quick there in the process because I was trying to remember why she was so popular at the time. And, you know, she'd just done a few films. I mean, there was that Stephen Hawking movie, and then she did the Inferno movie with Tom Hanks, which was the worst of all of those movies. But, you know, she just, for some reason, was the hot property at the time, so they put her in this and made her the star. It didn't work. The character was flat. You know, her performance was very wooden. You know, and it was the other characters, which sucked because some of the other characters around her were so much more interesting. I mean, like, Donnie Yen, Chirrut was very much more interesting than she was. Alan Tudyk, with a phenomenal performance as K2, and Cassian, all the other performances around her were so much better than her performance that it made her performance look that much worse. When you're surrounded by actors bawling out, even if you just put in a good performance, you're going to look bad in comparison. And she turned out an okay performance surrounded by a whole bunch of, she was surrounded by a whole bunch of, great performances that made hers look even worse. So that was the problem. She was the starring person, and they made such a big deal of Mads Mikkelsen being part of this that it sucked that he was only in such a small portion of it, so, but it was certainly a good film. The story was good. It was interesting. And of course, you hit the hammer, you hit the nail straight on when you said that this is the best shot. The cinematography in this film is amazing. Watching like the troopers and I don't think they were AT-ATs, but the AT whatevers they were specifically, storming the beach. All of those sequences were just fucking amazing. That it's
Rogue One now.
It just, it shined a light on so much of the other things that made it look worse than it actually was. But I mean, I came out of it having enjoyed it. I think I was much more positive on it at the time than you were. And I enjoyed it. And of course, that one was accompanied by our first day-long event with the guys from the local Star Wars gaming community. So, it introduced me to the X-Wing game, which was a huge thing for me personally.
Wasn't that the next year?
Nope, that was Rogue One.
I think it was Rogue One because I did that thing at work for Rogue One. Remember?
We did nothing for 7. Then we did Rogue One with them. Then Solo was the Super Pod.
We did Last Jedi with them. If you're talking,
and then Last Jedi was them.
No, yeah, you're getting your order of events confused because Ian was still here in town for the Last Jedi, and he went to the cafe.
Did he go to the second one, not the first one? No, maybe I am.
I don't know if we did anything for Rogue One. Wasn't Rogue One in the middle of that insane snowstorm?
Yes,
I think we almost crashed the car getting to the movie theater because of how bad it was. And we went out to dinner.
We did.
Oh, more mayonnaise?
No, this was much better than that.
Yeah, we went to the local spot that was still great at the time. Now, not so much. But then, yes.
Yeah, it's definitely hit or miss now.
I remember for Rogue One, I did, because my work at the time was so small. It was such a small team, like 10 people. I did like a Star Wars day at work. And it was like on that Thursday that Rogue One came out. And printed up some cool trivia questions, drew some prizes for people. It was a good time. It was fun. People still bring that up. Like every once in a while, people will still, because I found like it was like this bootleg Pog type game that they had for Star Wars, but like matching things. And I bought like 2 sets of them, and I used those for the drawing. And everybody got like their own little chip, and I got to keep the chip when it was done. So some people had like Kylo, R2, whatever. And every now
I
and then,
vaguely remember
people-
you talk about doing all that. Maybe seeing some pictures from the whole thing. That was pretty cool.
and people and I honestly I threw it all together that Wednesday night during the podcast. I was like join for a little while, drive to my next destination, run in, buy a bunch of shit, come back out, and I did it all. Like it was really cool, and people will still like message me every now and then, be like, I found that cool thing, we should do another Star Wars day. And I was like, well, y'all motherfuckers paying for it. That was expensive, and that was before inflation. But yeah, no, I think Rogue One was awesome.
Want to just before we get Tommy's thoughts on Rogue One, give a shout out to some of the people in the chat. Jade was here earlier, talking Star Wars, who's a listener to a lot of the Phantom Empire content. Is here. Zach Arnold is here. Turns out that Super Toneman in the chat, he should have told us this much earlier. We could have given him preferential treatment.
Is that Tony?
It's Tony from Geek Talk. That's right. Tony and Tommy, actually, fun fact, were the people that promoted Star Wars Wastelands for the very first time going on air right after they finished an episode of Geek Talk over on channel 1138. So a big shout out to Tony in the chat. By the way, George is in the chat too. He's chosen Nightwolf. So we got some of the old gang in here for this episode. It's fun seeing you guys again. And actually, we can now officially confirm that the next Monday, I'm gay. No, there's nothing wrong with that. But joking aside, next Monday we will be back for part 2 of our reunion special, where we will focus on the just because we're running long here, the Star Wars TV projects, Mandalorian, Book of Boba, Kenobi, maybe even some of the animated stuff, depending on what the guys have seen. And we're going to dive into the video games there, because we have a clip to play that I think all 3 of us regret about Star Wars Battlefront, but we'll save it for next Monday. So tune in next Monday for part 2, and then we'll go from there. Tommy, Rogue One, man, what did you think then, and what do you think now?
I have a question first, okay? So what does Jade think?
Oh, she's completely open to it.
Great.
Oh man, you.
Oh shit. Okay.
I
I
mean,
don't
she's open
remember.
to Rogue One, obviously.
Okay. That's what we're talking about now. So, okay. I don't remember what the fuck I was like going into Rogue One, to be totally honest with you. I got no fucking idea. I might have went into it kind of indifferent, honestly. It's the first time we're getting a spin-off film. We don't know what to think of it. Hey, guys, what if it sucks? Probably threw that one around. I've only been saying it every fucking Star Wars movie or project ever since, And honestly, when I came out of that theater, I was very much pleased with what we got. I was never a Rogue One hater. There might have been some parts I've been more critical of, but I've always enjoyed this film, and I'm very disappointed that the Star Wars spin-off films went the way they did. And that is by no means a knock at Solo, a film that I also enjoy. I feel like, as you were saying, it's shot very well. You see some pretty cool characters. They got away from the whole Jedi scheme, although not 100%. And as we all know, they still found a way to bring a lightsaber into the movie. And the way they brought said lightsaber in the movie, to this day remains one of the most powerful scenes. If only in relatively recent Star Wars history. Maybe not throughout the whole franchise, but it's fucking great. That Vader scene, it really sets us up for episode 4. As they all die off, where we watch the Tanev, they're loading up, they're running, and then we break, and we see Leia, and that was a powerful way to end the film. And if I remember correctly, guys, was it only like the very next day that Carrie Fisher passed away?
It was in and around that time, for sure.
I think she had the.
I think she passed away a little after.
Yeah, I think she was in the hospital when it came out, and passed away just shortly after.
Like the next day, then maybe the
It was
day
very
after.
soon.
Yeah, I know, because at this point we were actually the wife and I, we were going and catching the film for me again, but I was going with her. The following, I might have been like a Tuesday night or something like that. Cheapo Tuesday movie night sort of thing. That was pretty cool. Back when you could go get a movie ticket for $5 on a cheap movie night. Remember cheap movie nights? I remember cheap movie nights. Yeah, they're not a fucking thing anymore.
Yeah, definitely not.
Well, they are if you know where the back door to the movie theater is. I mean, come on, people.
Yeah, fantastic. But
so
bittersweet.
Passed 11 days after the release of Rogue One. She passed away on the 27th of December. Rogue One came out on the 16th or the 15th.
I could be thinking then of my second viewing of the film as like the day before, the day after, something like that.
It was the day of the second viewing of the film that the day that I saw the film for the second time, and that time was.
In fact, I think you were there when I texted you, weren't you? Wasn't that how it happened?
Yeah, I was with Zach and my son Zach, not Zach Arnold. And
I texted you that she'd passed, and you were at the theater with your son to watch it.
Yeah,
if I recall correctly.
Yeah, we did a special that night too on it when we found out the news. So.
Yep.
Speaking of which, the guy that was on that special, Mr. Ty Nelson, says, good seeing you guys. Gonna call it a night. May the force be with you, all of you.
Adios, muchacho.
Definitely hope to see you next week, man. Come back, check out the rest of this episode. We probably got another 30 or 40 minutes to go here. We'll see how it goes. We have a few more movies to go to. Let's go around the table here quickly. Favorite character in this movie and favorite moment. Favorite moment for me is obviously the Vader scene at the end. There's a bunch of great moments in this movie, but the Vader scene is just so iconic now that it's a cop out to pick it, but I'm picking it. And my favorite character, it's when I seen the film, it probably was K2SO. But now having some context to the background of the character for Cassian, it's definitely Cassian.
So I'm gonna go with K2. I feel like I feel like I'm cheating if I pick Cassian because the stuff that we know about him now from Andor, we didn't know at the time, right? So K2 is probably still my favorite character from this particular film. And I'm gonna pick a different scene than the Vader scene. My favorite scene when I watched it last month or the month before was when they walk in to the ocean right there and they get dead. Like when they're like kind of like walking into like their own death, pretty much. It's like they're literally walking into the sunset because like you see them walking into it. And I just thought that was kind of a cool, powerful thing. Like they accepted their thing. And Johnny, what are you sucking on?
What?
Oh, it looked like I saw Johnny. His head was like bobbing under his camera.
I was scrolling my phone.
Yeah, that's what we call it these days. Come on, baby, why don't you scroll my phone? It's like an iPad. It's like an iPod Nano. So anyway, so yeah, that was it.
Who wants to give their favorite moment, favorite character?
Well, I'll go next. For me, I think favorite character, again, I'm not gonna hindsight pick it, so I'm not gonna change to Cassian because obviously I haven't watched the series, so I have no idea whether or not I actually be attached to him more now than I was then. But strictly from that film, favorite character is K2. He was the closest we'd ever gotten to HK-47 in the actual Star Wars universe. And I thought it was, I love Alan Tudyk. There's very little that man has ever done that I haven't enjoyed. Favorite moment, though, it is a bit out of left field for me, and it would probably be the Chirrut scene on the beach. When he has to cross across the field, across the open field, getting shot at by the shock troopers, and and he's doing the "I'm one with the Force is with me" mantra, walking across the beach. To get to the to shut down the shield, I think it was.
Yeah, that was cool.
That sequence cool. Was just so, so pure, and I enjoyed it, and seeing that little bit of Force interaction in sort of a ephemeral way, a non-Force user sort of using the Force. This is what I thought was really cool. I really liked that sequence, and it looked really good.
So this is a tough one for me. To be honest, Cassian was a bit of an acquired taste for me. It took a little bit. I really like him as a character, but it took a little bit. K2, SO, totally loved them. But I didn't come out of the movie saying, "Oh, favorite character." Oh, I just didn't. I kind of enjoyed seeing Jyn Erso, but at the same time, there are some quirky things about her character that may, make one look the other way. So I'll say,
like her fucking acting.
Well, okay. Cheer it, definitely. Just it was awesome. He was friggin' awesome, and I don't think there was any rule made about not saying this, so I stick by what I said. The end scene with not end scene, but the Vader scene. It's the best one of the whole film. So.
Can we take a moment here, just in the real world, and just laugh at our good friend Mike Bish for having to watch his Philadelphia Eagles flush a perfect season down the drain to the Washington Commanders?
Sorry, Mike. I'm not even a football fan, and I know that's gotta hurt.
Oh God, that makes me so happy.
And all of a sudden, the NFC East is like, we suck again.
Is someone having pain with their microphone?
I'm sorry, what? Did you just say that? What? Good God, man! Oh my
Mondo book. Anyways, that's gonna do it for our Rogue One discussion tonight. Want to thank Tommy for coming out and participating in this, man. And I guess now you'll have an opportunity to rejoin next week and maybe talk some Star Wars TV for a segment.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
All righty. That is Tommy B, anal fucker himself.
All right. Good night, everybody.
And that is going to do it for Tommy B, which brings us to this movie, fellas. The Last Jedi. we do need to quicken the pace here a bit, and there's still 3 movies to talk about. We already kind of touched a lot on this movie earlier on, but this movie, without doubt, no matter what side you fall on, divided a fan base. It absolutely did. The fan base was in a pretty good spot after Rogue One, even. And when this movie came out, you had people falling on each side of the turf war with some casualties in the middle, and obviously all that stuff was unfortunate, really. But when you look at the movie, just as a movie, critically it was received very well.
That should have been our first hint.
I don't have the same regrets with this movie that I do with Rogue One. My regrets for Rogue One are extreme, but I do, and I have watched this movie somewhat recently in the last year, and I remember seeing it and going, you know what? The parts of this movie that I didn't like to begin with, I still don't like, but the parts of the movie that I love with that movie, I love even more now. And I think I can stomach the movie far better today than I could then. And I think the biggest thing for me is when it came out, it was like, kind of like Mondo was saying earlier, I had like here's the problem. When you deal with the spoiler game, right? When you're willing to read spoilers, you also have to be willing to accept the possibility that maybe some of the spoilers you read are not real. And then you get attached to an idea. And The Last Jedi was far less definitive than The Force Awakens when it came to the spoilers. And I read a big batch of spoilers probably a few days before the release. And it got me gun-ho for the direction of the film. And when that did not happen, it was like Mike Tyson punching me as hard as he could in the face or in the balls, maybe. But it, again, my preconceived notions got in my head, and I definitely think it affected my viewing experience. I also, like the first night we seen this, I had a splitting headache. That didn't help. It is not my favorite Star Wars movie. It will never be my favorite Star Wars movie. But there's some things I will give it credit for. Number one, it is literally the only Star Wars Disney production for the big screen that wasn't surrounded by a bunch of behind-the-scenes drama. The Force Awakens had Harrison Ford breaking his leg. Rogue One quite literally had Gareth Edwards being benched in favor of Tony Gilroy. The Last Jedi went off without a hitch. Solo, we had the whole team fired. The Rise of Skywalker, we had a team fired. It was the only movie that, went off as planned. And I guess you could say it got delayed, so maybe that's where it had its issue. But I don't know. Just in general, guys, I'm more receptive and more open. I'm more open to receiving The Last Jedi than I was 5 years ago. So again, not my favorite film, but I enjoy it more today.
And what you just talked about, though, is exactly kind of what I mentioned earlier, where we kind of wrote the movie ourselves, whether it was through ideas, whether it was through false spoilers, whether it was through, conversations that we kind of talked each other into liking certain or thinking certain ways, right? And all of that kind of went out the wayside, right? Because, hell, there was an entire hashtag, your Snoke theory sucks. Because remember, leading into this film, we all had these ideas of who Snoke was going to be, what Snoke was going to be. Is he the new Palpatine? Is he going to be the new, like how big is he going to be? And then halfway through this film, he gets slicey. And it's, I think it was upsetting, and I'll agree. The first time I saw this movie, I was like, oh man, oh no, what did they do? And then I watched it again later on that weekend. And I enjoyed it a little more the second time through than I did the first time. Um, Maybe because there was a lot to unpack with this movie. And that was one problem I did have with this film, still have with this film, will forever have with this film, is I kind of feel like they tried to cram as many big moments into this movie as they possibly could. And I feel like they overdid it a little bit. I feel like they kind of overstated some of that. But this movie did do some stuff right. Like, Canto Bite, I think is what it's called. Like, the scene was stupid. Made no sense, but it looked cool. Like, it looked nice. Visually, it was a great movie. But the other problem that I had, and we talked about this at length, and Sean, I think you were the one that brought it up to us originally on the show, was this movie picks up right where episode 7 ends. And they didn't even get Luke's outfit right. Like it's like...
It was the hair specifically. It was the hair was completely different, and he went from this super prepared, stunning looking guy to kind of bummish.
Like, what happened? Like, did a gust of wind come? Like, did a porg fart in your face? Like, I don't understand what happened between now and then. And then, like, the massive shift change. Like, you go for the end of episode 7, and it's this badass, cool moment, right? The theater applauded seeing Luke Skywalker and seeing, Rey hold out the lightsaber. And then you start episode 8 with him just tossing it over his shoulder, like he doesn't care. Like, I don't know. Like, to me, I felt like the shift change in the tone differential really was unfortunate.
There's definitely a tone difference. Like, when you leave The Force Awakens and enter The Last Jedi, there's a severe tone difference. And then it happens again with The Rise of Skywalker. But I am happy to know that, like, you received the film better today than you did then. Lube does wonders. No, I'm kidding. It's a like that moment where Luke walks out at the end of the movie, and yes, he's Force ghost projecting Luke, but he's still Luke Skywalker, and he's still essentially there, giving it his all, is one of the most badass, moments in Star Wars, if I'm being honest. Do I like that he died from it? Not necessarily, and yet that moment is just, that's an all-timer for me. Johnny?
I mean, for me, I think that, I think you're right in saying that the tone was completely different. The movies felt unconnected, and I think part of that is the massive shift in Luke. Yes, people could argue, well, we never actually saw him in 7, so it wasn't really a tonal shift for Luke. So, okay, maybe, but, here we are, and the first time we see him, like you said, he looked different, and that was something that, how does that happen? There's literally a person whose sole job on the films is continuity, and that's a big one, it just, that's a, I'd allow that mistake in a fan film, not in a multi-$100 million project. That. No, that's not. That's an inexcusable mistake. And then the first thing he does is just, takes the lightsaber and just chucks it over his shoulder. Like, excuse me? This is still Luke Skywalker. This is still, it just, it wasn't just a tonal shift. It was a complete shift. and they spent literally a movie and a half trying to explain that and make it make sense, and didn't really achieve that. So and of course, like you said, we all spent time writing it out, and Mondo brought up the ever popular your Snoke theories. Quite frankly, I think 90% of the Snoke theories were better than the actual Snoke presentation, but that's another story. It just, there was just so much of it that, we all sort of worked ourselves up into what we wanted to see happening, that this film provided none of that. I can't point to a single person who wasn't a spoiler, who wasn't a leaker, and say, yeah, you got the story right. Nobody did. We all might have had small bits and small pieces, but nobody had the story correct. Nobody had money on Snoke getting killed halfway through the film in an abrupt and quick fashion without any build up. It was the most anticlimactic of any sequence in any Star Wars film I can think of, if I'm being honest. They spent the first film making this guy out to be the next big bad, and they just it's like, you go from the first movie to this. I said earlier that, I made the joke, oh, you mean they didn't have this trilogy planned out from the start? And this film proved it, because it took characters that were made to be important, it took storylines that were meant to be something, and changed them. Each individual film might be good on its own merits, but as part of a trilogy, it does not fit at all. None of these films fit. This is the most disjointed trilogy of any trilogy I've ever seen, period, in anything. And this film hurt for it. Taking an entire, nearly one act of this film and turning it into the Canto Bight sequence was just the stupidest decision they could have made. They cast a phenomenally talented actor like Benicio del Toro and then just wipe him away in 5 minutes of screen time on a character that is meaningless in the grand scheme of things. It's just there was so little of important parts of this, like the important things they did weren't built up properly, and they didn't feel authentic. So while it was a good film in certain parts, and the sequences were, visually they were great, and some of the characters were really good. Like Hamlin Holdo was a good character, and there were some good characters, but overall it just felt disjointed and unconnected to what had come before it, which is the exact opposite of what you want in the middle part of a trilogy.
Yeah, so it is disjointed. I don't know. You could be the biggest fan of this film ever, and I don't know how you could say it's not disjointed from the first movie. It is, and we can place some blame on the fans themselves for how it went down. We can also place a little bit of blame, though, on the studio. They're like, yeah, it's their property to do whatever they want with, but at the same time, very clearly mishandled it. Like, that's not up for debate. And then as we go into the Rise of Skywalker, actually, before we do that, favorite character in The Last Jedi and favorite moment, Mondo?
Man.
The end credits.
When I didn't drop my nachos this time. No. Oh my gosh.
Here, I'll give you some time. I'll go. My favorite character in the flick is Luke Skywalker. Whether he is my Luke Skywalker or not, or the way I would have written him is not the point. Mark Hamill's performance in this movie is fantastic. I think, well, now I'm not so sure. It's a toss. Luke feels like the cop-out answer, and again, it feels like the answer probably should be Kylo Ren. I dig both of those characters. Adam Driver's clearly the stand-up performer of the trilogy, in my opinion. Although Daisy Ridley's right there. Johnny, you got any?
Okay, so Um,
And I
my
already
favorite.
said that moment. It's the Luke.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm going to answer this in the most Wastelands appropriate way possible. My favorite moment, easily the Canto Bite scene, and my favorite character, Broom Boy.
Oh, Broom Boy. Oh, man. You know,
I was hoping
going
for a
back
better
to that,
response.
you know what? I even remember after the movie came out, all the theories started coming out again. And went from who's Snoke to who's Broom Boy, and we were all trying like, maybe that's gonna be like Rey's lost.
Maybe that's the Last Jedi.
Yeah, like it's not the Last Jedi. If this little motherfucker's got a broom, he survived. You know, I'm gonna stick with Rey as my favorite character. I know she wasn't the best written character, but I still feel like that story arc of not knowing who you are, not fully understanding what you're capable of, and it's super Star Wars tropey too, right? Because you discover you have this ability, you don't know where it starts, where it ends. You're not only trying to figure that out, you're trying to figure out your place, you're trying to figure out who you are. And while doing all of that, she's still trying to reach out to save Kylo Ren. Kylo Ren murdered his father. Like, straight up, murdered him. Right? And she's still trying to reach out. She can still see that good in him. She can still sense that good in him. So I feel like I got to stick with that. And as far as a favorite scene, man, that's tough. I did like the fight scene where Rey and Kylo slice and dice up all them red-looking dildo guys.
Yeah, that's cool.
I didn't
Star
like
Wars is Putty Patrol.
I didn't like what happened after that. But I liked that scene. I thought that was cool. And I thought that was well choreographed and really fun to watch. So I'll probably stick with that.
And then came the... Sorry, Johnny. Then came the... When Kylo tells Rey that she's nobody, everybody being like... Not everybody, but a big portion of the fan base took that and like weaponized it. It's like, ha, Rey's no one. She was meant to be no one. Ha ha ha. Just to find out the next movie that she was going to be someone and is someone. And it just like stuff like that created a turf war kind of.
Unnecessary turf war.
Yeah. You were going to say something, Johnny?
Well, I was going to say I actually do have legit answers because, the joke was the joke. But, favorite character, I already mentioned her, Amilyn Holdo. I think Laura Dern had one of the best performances by a person not one of the main characters in Star Wars. I just enjoyed the character, the way she interacted with Finn, with Poe, not Finn, with Finn and Leia and all of those other moments. I really enjoyed them, and I enjoyed the character, and I loved her. Let's be honest. Favorite moment? It's hard to nail down. I mean, there's a lot of contenders. I mean, I think that in any other film, it probably would have been the Holdo maneuver, because visually it was just amazing and stunning and awesome, and ramming a Star Destroyer with a ship and destroying it like that. It was just intense, but for me, the best moment has to be Luke and Leia's last interaction. Inside the bunker when he shows up and gives her Han's dice, and that moment, just knowing that we would never get them on screen together, knowing Carrie had passed, and knowing that this was it for her character. I mean, at the time we didn't know this was it for Luke because he on screen hadn't passed away yet. So if you didn't know if you didn't know spoilers, you didn't know that this was the last time that these two characters would get to interact. It just worked so perfectly in that moment where, it played its purpose that they're always together. And I think it was just a heartbreaking moment in amongst the reality and a phenomenally acted scene by two, phenomenal actors. And just that it was heartbreaking and gut-wrenching and emotional. And that's not something we get in Star Wars very often, is that real emotion. And that moment played it phenomenally, and it was, obviously the last time we'd get to see those two together.
Yeah, the musical cue right after that, before he walks outside too, is just so powerful. It's an incredible moment. Any final thoughts before we move on to the Rise of Skywalker and Dark Knight? No. Alrighty, let's move on to Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Beautiful artwork. And I kind of think it ends right about there because let me just say, I was one of those guys that when I started to read the spoilers for Episode 9, I was like, yeah, screw you, Rian Johnson, for ruining what I wanted out of Star Wars Episode 8. They're now giving it back to you, So, like, the Star Wars fan in me was bitter because it was very clear that they decided to go the complete opposite way of everything they set up in Episode 8. And Episode 8 kind of went the complete opposite way of everything they set up in Episode 7, which is why you have this disjointed trilogy. And then I actually went to see the movie, and I remember Johnny and I and Jade and a couple other people went to see it. And I just sort of stood there at like the table area after the movie, and there's just this weird silence amongst us all, and like sort of were just looking at our phones, and I think I looked up at Johnny and said, "That sucked." Like, I had every reason to champion The Rise of Skywalker, and if you do, that's fantastic. And to be honest, I like the movie more now when you partner it with the Shadows of the Sith Adam Christopher new canon book that's out, that does a wonderful job on expanding on so many things. Again, though, it comes back to you shouldn't have to read a book to experience a movie properly. And I hated The Last Jedi when it came out, but you chose to go that way, so you should have owned it and followed up with what that film set up, in my opinion. And then they didn't. They went and doubled down on what they did before and just went the complete opposite way. And I honestly think that hurt the whole trilogy. I think if you would have at least followed up Episode 8 with something that felt like it was supposed to be a follow-up to Episode 8, the trilogy would always still feel disjointed, but I don't think it would feel disjointed to the point that it does now. And it's so weird that it feels that way because it was J.J. Abrams who did Episode 7, and it even sort of feels disjointed to that movie too. So, like, I do not have a ton of positive experiences about this movie, guys. I seen it again this year after not seeing it for probably 2 years since release here. And I didn't enjoy it. There's eye candy. There's some cool acting moments, but as a movie, and more specifically as a trilogy, I thought that they basically shot themselves in the foot here. Mondo, where are you with The Rise of Skywalker, and where were you when it came out? Because we never got to talk about this film.
Well, I was in Irving, Texas. That's actually, I was in Grapevine, Texas, where I watched the movie. Oh, that is bright. Holy crap. I'm gonna be real with you, okay? It's funny that, never mind. They tried too much to fix what Rian Johnson had did, and they made it worse. And this is what I meant earlier when I said the shift, or the tonal shifts in these films were god awful for it, because you had episode 7, then you had, and then it was like, yeah. Then you had episode 8, and you were like, what the fuck? And then you had episode 9, where you were like, are they even trying? Like, I don't understand what they're doing here. So, with that being said, like, this movie was so underwhelming to me. I don't remember 99% of it. And that's disappointing to me because I was really looking forward to this film because you and I had talked previously before the film, or shortly before the film. Everything before the film would have been previously before the film. So we talked shortly before the film. And you had actually kind of clued me in that Palpatine was going to be Rey's kinfolk. And we had talked about that a little bit because it sort of hinted in the Star Wars Battlefront 2 campaign that Palpatine had a bigger hand in the prequel trilogy than what we got. And we'll talk about that more next Monday. Here, same place, same time. Maybe a little less alcohol from Mondo. Which the joke I was going to make a minute ago was kind of funny that all but one of the characters on the graphic for the reunion show, we're not even talking about their franchises today. Now that we are, that's better. Look at you, little baby Yoda, looking all cute and shit. But I just, not only did they shoehorn Palpatine into this movie, right? As a clone, right? They did that really weird. Then they also shoehorned Rey being a Skywalker. Like, it was like, if you wanted her to be a Skywalker, why not just make her a fucking Skywalker? Like, why jump through all the hoops, man?
I mean, as crazy as it sounds, that part I actually had less issue with than a lot of what had come before it in the film, because that sort of played up the Star Wars element of you pick your own destiny. You know, and I never really had an issue with that. But the whole making her a Palpatine thing, I felt was just stupid. You know, right from the moment I found out that Palpatine was the villain, my first thought was, oh, so it's, you know, a Palp clone, you know, that he cloned himself at some point in the process, and you know, that's fine. And then it's like, well, no, he actually survived. Like, what? Huh? Huh?
Somehow Palpatine has returned.
Like, it's just,
Well, he
you know,
survived. He died. He died. But through the Force, he was able to. The whole TV universe is actually slowly explaining their thoughts. Obviously, this was not their thought when they made the movie. This is them trying to band-aid some things. Shadows of the Sith does this too. But, you know, for all intents and purposes, Snoke was a Palpatine pawn. Palpatine is the villain of this trilogy. At least that's the way they ended up writing it off.
But the problem was they hadn't built that. Like, there were no...
Oh, I agree.
there were no breadcrumbs to get us there. Like, there was at no point in this, like, to the point that, oh, Snoke is Palpatine was a ha-ha-ha joke. You know, like, it was one of those things that was laughed off as so ridiculous that it's funny. And here it comes that actually the truth. That's what really happens. That's the reality of the circumstance. It's not a joke. I was like, how did we get here? You know, like, the story was ridiculous in that the way that it played that. Like, ha 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 ha. I was secretly the bad guy all along. Like, what?
And
Like,
you
if
did
there
that-
had been like illusions or secrets and breadcrumbs that Snoke was not the higher power, like it's purely me spitballing hypothetically. If we throw in a scene in 8 of Kylo walking unannounced into Snoke's chambers, and Snoke's chair is turned around the other way, and he's having a conversation with a hologram, then all of a sudden you start asking questions. You start wondering, who's he talking to? What's going on here? Like, where's the what's the reality? And then you can play that off and leave those breadcrumbs and little bits and little pieces. But there was never that. There was never those breadcrumbs, never those little pieces, never any illusions that, that A, Snoke wasn't the villain, and B, that, Palpatine was secretly the one pulling the strings all along. Like, how did we get here? And it's not even like, it was explained in books or TV or comics or cartoons or anything like that. At the time, I mean.
Yeah, okay.
Like, since then, they've been going about trying
I actually
to...
really like the Shadows of the Sith novel. And for people that haven't seen the movie yet, if they decide to read that book before going and seeing the movie, you'll get way more out of that movie than the people that got to see the movie when it was first released got out of it. But again, it shouldn't have to be that way.
Exactly. Like, there's nothing wrong with, books and comics and things like that coming afterwards, sort of cleaning up a little bit, and closing loopholes. But you shouldn't need to read these books and novels and comics and cartoons or any of those other objects to understand the film itself. Like, they should be the appendix, the extras, the add-ons, the alsos. If you would like a bit more in-depth detail on this particular plotline, read this book. Not the overall story must be understood, so therefore read this book, and then this book, and then that comic, and then watch this cartoon. Like, it's not... it needs to be a one and done experience if that's all you're interested in. If you don't want to read the books, you shouldn't have to read the books to fully understand the movie, and that's not something you can do with this.
And, I hate to go back to this, Will, but earlier you brought up Marvel. And that's something Marvel, I feel, has done a master class, I almost said masturbate, a master class job of with their television series or Disney Plus series, along with their films. Like when you went and saw Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, it had a lot of tie-ins to WandaVision.
Mm-hmm.
But they did a beautiful job of, in the movie itself, right? Like, kind of replaying the moments from WandaVision that you would have needed to know to understand the plot points. Like,
you weren't lost not having watched it.
Yeah. So me having watched WandaVision, I got a little extra out of it because I'm like, oh, this all makes sense. Like, I understand it. I understand Wanda. I understand that. But had I not watched it, I still would have had an understanding of what was happening. And Star Wars has not done that. They have not done that, and I feel like that's sort of why, to Sean's point from earlier on in this show, is I feel like, and I agree with what he said, Disney and Lucasfilm are terrified to release the next Star Wars film, because really it's been like a snowball. Like, ever since Episode 7, every movie that has come after it has been more forgettable, more divisive. I didn't say decisive this time. I actually said divisive. And just overall underwhelming. And how many times can you do that before people throw their hands up and say, you know what, I can't do it? Yeah, you're going to have the faithful. You're going to have that'll go, they could take two dookies and dress them up like, Star Wars characters and look like Mr. Hanky Strikes Back. And there's a large population that would go watch that. But at the end of the day, like, this was a terrible way because it ended the trilogy. And here's what, and I'm just gonna do my closing for this tier. And this was my biggest problem with it. Because we start off in episode 7 and we're like, oh, it's pretty obvious. Rey's a Skywalker. Right? It's obvious. And then there were the grumbles and the rumors. Oh, no, she's a Kenobi. You know? And then, there were even times, I want to say there were even like small inklings of us. And I think Sean and I talked about this after playing Battlefront 2. We're like, oh, maybe she's a Palpatine. And then there were even like the weird theories. Oh, maybe she's a Solo. Like maybe she's actually Han's long lost daughter, and that's why he knows it, and that's why he kind of took such a liking to her in episode 7 and was teaching her certain things and shit like about how to fix the Falcon, etc., etc. But the overall original idea was she was a Skywalker, and that seemed obvious and it seemed apparent through the majority of it. And I kind of felt like, in this weird way, they did so much to make her not a Skywalker just to make her a Skywalker. They got so off with the story, they had to do the one thing I kind of felt like they were trying not to do. And for what payoff? Like, the trilogy had almost no payoff at all. Like, zero. Zilch.
You killed all the characters. Congratulations. You killed all the legacy characters. Almost
not
like
only
you set
did,
out on a mission to do it.
not even that. You also killed off some of your new characters. Like your like the new characters that you could have used.
Well, you stunted Finn. Like you stunted Finn. Finn went from being intriguing in the 7th movie to I don't know what the hell that was for him in the last 2. And yeah, I remember going on ad nauseum. Oh, so the predictable thing is they're going to kill Kylo Ren. They're going to kill Kylo Ren. Even though he became Ben Solo in the movie, he still ended up dying. And I thought you needed a way to get out of this trilogy without killing that character. And they weren't able to do that. Although it probably would have been hard to get Adam Driver to come back anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there was... The entire movie was sort of cleanup. And the third part of your trilogy should never be that. No part of a third trilogy should be that bad. I mean, it was just awful. There was nothing left. I mean, yes, reality sort of forced their hand a bit in those decisions. Like 100% certain that the episode 9 we get is very different if Carrie Fisher is still around. Because I think that, she did have a much bigger part to play in that story, but
her scenes are terrible. They're
they
so bad. And it's like, I think you did the film more harm by trying to shoehorn her in than just saying she passed on in between films.
And that was one of my biggest problems with 8. Not to cut you off, Johnny, but that was because there was in that scene in episode 8, they had her dead, and it was after she had passed away, which was one of the reasons I believe episode 8 got delayed, or it had already gotten delayed, but you had her killed. In that scene in episode 8, you had her killed. She was floating through space. And it was done. Like, awesome. Done. Adios. But they didn't let that happen. They kept her alive. They killed the wrong characters. And then when you get to episode 9, you're like, okay, well, now what do we do? Like, what do we do? Like, oh boy. So yeah, like the whole thing is a mess. It's like the best way I could explain this trilogy is they tried putting a jigsaw puzzle together with pieces from different sets.
Yeah, that makes some sense. By the way, the Luke Skywalker scene in this movie is horrendous. I cringe at it every time I see it. It's so bad. And it just makes me wonder if just J.J. Abrams had no idea how to utilize that character. Because obviously they made the decision in The Force Awakens that they did. Johnny, you want to finish up your thoughts here and also give us your favorite moment and character from the film?
I mean, I think, it just... There was no way they could have done it right with the Carrie Fisher decision. Her passing completely... it puts them in an untenable position. No matter the decision they make, it's the wrong decision. If you leave her off screen and just have her, pass away in between films, then you do the character dirty, because that's Princess Leia and she deserves so much more than that. Or you have her in the film like they did in these sequences that don't look good because they're obviously not shot for purpose. They're extras, they're cutting room scraps that they're pieced together and put together with a little bit of CG mixed in to make it work. And it's like, they're not good. They don't work. They don't fit. They're forced. They're ham-fisted. They're just not good sequences that don't fit the tone. No matter what they did, they couldn't get it right. And I think that hurt them a great deal. Because I think, again, this is a film that would have been so much different had she been around. I think a lot of the things would have made a lot more sense, especially the ending. I think there's a sequence, in my head anyway, if Carrie's still around, there's a sequence in the back of the film after Rey finds out she's a Palpatine, where she talks with Leia, and Leia explains that, it's not your blood, it's your choices that make you who you are. Something to that effect, because, I'm the daughter of Darth Vader, and this is what I became. I never had, that. There's so much more that could have been.
Are you saying that's what they should have done?
I'm saying that if Carrie was around, I think that's what they would have done.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, wait, that totally did not happen in the movie.
No. I'm saying that I think that it makes it a lot different that we get to the end where she does the whole "I'm a Skywalker" thing. She chooses to be that, and it's because of the things that Leia has taught her and told her that it's not your blood, it's who you choose to be. It's what you choose to do with that's important.
You titled the movie The Rise of Sky, and I don't want to get on a long tangent here, so I'll keep this short. You titled the movie The Rise of Skywalker just for marketing purposes. And because you slapped the last name on her at the end of the movie, regardless of her relationship with Leia, that's how you get away with that title. She gives herself that last name. But you also connect with all these different Force ghosts in the movie. The original plan was to bring a bunch of them in and actually have them visually show up. And they don't. And I just can't help but wonder, seeing the fact that Yoda made contact with the actual physical world in episode 8. Luke does it again with catching the lightsaber in episode 9. Like, you had a chance to bring back Hayden Christensen then as Anakin Skywalker and have a legitimate The Rise of Skywalker moment in that movie, and have him be the one to either aid Rey or him take out Palpatine. The story that they've literally set up from the beginning, and they literally chose, you know what's gonna do it? We're gonna have a bunch of voices wake Rey up, and then it's just this. It's executed terribly. That's me getting some headcanon stuff in my head and just wanting things to be different, but like, they had so many different avenues they could have taken, and I just don't understand how they ended up on the least creative, most uninteresting one of them all, it feels like.
There's like in headcanon and in our voices, like we can sit here and look back in 50-50 hindsight and say, man, you could have made this so much better. Like, let's take that chamber sequence with Rey hearing the voices of the Jedi's past, and let's add Kylo into that. Because to this point, he is, he's turned back, but he's not fully there. How different is this sequence if, he has a moment where Palpatine incapacitates him, takes him out of the battle. Rey is being beaten because she's not fully trained. She's not ready. She's not there yet. She's, all of these so many things. And Anakin pops up in front of Kylo because, he's the manifestation of everything that Kylo's story. Like, Kylo's story is built around Darth Vader. I will finish what you started. It's such a huge, iconic line from previously in this trilogy that, now you can come full circle with this vindication of the character by having Anakin Skywalker show up and boost Kylo to finish what I started. You thought that was destroy the Jedi, but it's not.
Can I also say these guys seem to always think that they know how the fandom's going to respond to things, and time and time again they've been off on it. The casting Matt Smith as young Palpatine,
phenomenal, A+,
and then deciding not to use him because instead of doing a full-on lightsaber battle with Ben and Rey against young Palpatine, let's do this light show in between the two, and let's just keep McDiarmid as Palpatine because that's what fans want to see. They don't want to see anybody else as him. And I'm thinking to myself, that's Matt fucking Smith. Anyways, I'll be here all night if I go on about that. I will say this though, before we give our favorite scene and favorite characters, regardless of how you feel about the Rise of Skywalker. And like Mondo, I was just kind of happy it was over once it was over. Like, thank God it's over. We can move on. I am now sitting here 3 years later going, I'm ready for another Star Wars movie, but I'll be honest, it ain't any of the ones they've announced so far. So, because either they get delayed or canceled or whatever. I want a project that's going to excite the fans again. For all the bitter feelings there might be at times, I would never change the fact that we got to do this and how much fun it has been. My favorite character in this movie is Kylo Ren, and my favorite moment in this movie is Kylo Ren's whole opening sequence from his time on the mutated Mustafar at the beginning, all the way to finding Clone Palpatine.
I mean,
So
I struggle. I don't know if I can pick favorite character and favorite moment from this movie because there's so little that I really truly enjoyed. But I guess again, cop out answers. It's Kylo, I guess, because he's the only character that actually told a story that didn't feel unauthentic to the character we'd seen in the previous two films. Like, despite the complete disjointed nature of this trilogy as a whole, Kylo as a character at least sort of felt wavy. Like, he was the one unfettered part of this storm that was this trilogy, and that his story from 7, 8, 9 sort of told together in a nice way made him a great character. And, Adam Driver's performance was amazing all the way through. Best sequence? Best moments? God, I have no idea. I don't know if I can pick one that's good and be like, man, that moment really did it for me. And I guess maybe when Lando shows up with the troops at Exegol, with all of the ships, because
Transformers looking sequence they did.
I mean, I did,
because
at least it was fun to try and play spot the ship. That was about the only good part of it that I can point to, because even the Han Solo ghost sequence with Kylo all felt sort of forced and not as good as it could have been.
Mondo, take us home, baby.
So Kylo Ren was my favorite character because I felt like the Adam Driver, the way he delivered that character, and the way that the redemption arc was handled, or the way he handled that, I think was awesome. And as much as my favorite moment of the film, though, and as much as I hate the symbol, like what it stands for in the movie, what I feel like it stands for realistically, though, is when Rey finally makes her own lightsabers. And I say that because, I've mentioned that this whole film, like, I felt like the reason I loved Rey so much is she was trying to find who she was. And I felt like that's what it was. Now, I hate that they used her rising, becoming a Skywalker in that. But I felt like at least they capped off one part of their story in a way. And it was her not necessarily becoming a Skywalker, but her finding who she wanted to be. And that was kind of, she chose that. That was the path she chose. And I kind of felt like, as sort of like, it's going to sound weird, but as an uncle, to beautiful girls, I felt like that was actually really cool. And I kind of felt like if they ever chose to get into Star Wars and Uncle has to explain that these 3 movies suck, when they get to that, I hope that it motivates them, that they can choose to be the hero in their own story. And that's why I thought that was cool. Like I said, I hate that she became a Skywalker. Absolutely shoehorned in. They did everything they could not to make it happen, and it did. But just I guess the symbolism of what it stood for outside of that.
Yeah, no, I think that's it's maybe not your typical hero's journey path, but it's still a hero's journey that gets told, similar to what Star Wars is based off of, Joseph Campbell's works. That is basically going to do it for us tonight, ladies and gentlemen. But little treat as we go off air. The sound quality is not going to be great on this, but reminder that we will have part 2 to this next week. Same time, 9 p.m. Eastern, Monday night, where we'll dive into Solo and the rest of the TV shows. And we went 3 hours on this one without even getting to that stuff. Surprise, surprise. Or trivia, for that matter. So...
Oh, shut up.
With that said, from June 2015.
Without further ado, let me introduce my co-hosts. This would not be possible without them. First up is Mondo. How are you, buddy?
Man, I'm doing good. How's everybody else doing tonight? Everyone excited?
No, I sure am.
Man, it's awesome. Thank you for Channel 1138 for giving us this pretty awesome opportunity here.
And last but certainly not least, my comrade of 21 years, the General himself, McMahon.
Hi, hola, and aloha, and wherever you say hello from wherever you're listening from. It's truly a pleasure to be here tonight on Channel 1138.
It sure is, and for a quick moment, now we will let you guys know we have a show pretty well scripted out for you guys, but we're going to go off topic here for a second to begin. Who here knows in the chat the story about how the filming went down in Tunisia for Episode 4, New Hope, or in Episode 1, The Phantom Menace? It was more or less all hell. Well, for the last 2 hours, the three of us have encountered hell of our own. Fate, as you'd have it. McMahon here, his modem breaks 2 hours before we go on the air. He goes out to pick up a new one. He brings it all the way home, and that one doesn't work. And if anybody is from Canada here, most stores close at about 9 p.m. Eastern. So he had to run back out, get another one. Thank God that one worked. It doesn't end there, though. Mondo bought this brand new headset, really nice headset, specifically for the show. And it stops working on him due to Windows updates. And last but not least, literally, I was listening to Geek Talk, and apparently as they plugged our show, which we appreciate, by the way, and congratulations on the 1-year anniversary, my fire alarm goes off here. and they evacuate the house. Someone apparently doesn't know how to cook eggs upstairs. But what do I know?
Yeah, so
Go ahead, Mono.
I actually want to add that my troubles actually started last night when I go to do a Windows update, and I got this nice, beautiful gem of a message that says, "We're unable to complete your update. Undoing changes." And it sat on that screen until about, 2 o'clock this morning, 3 o'clock this morning. And the whole time I'm freaking out. Like, why does it have to be the night before our first show? Man.
Fate as it would have it, apparently. Or somebody doesn't want us getting to air, one or the other. With that said...
About the fourth time I've said "with that said." Anyways, there's a few other clips from that show, including us praising what was then an upcoming Star Wars game. And I feel so dirty the way we talk about that one game. Anyways, that's going to do it for us this evening. Thanks for doing this, guys. It was fun. It was a marathon, old Wasteland style. And we'll have part 2 next week. Johnny, what do you got going on? Where can everybody find you at, man?
Oh, you can find me here, there, and everywhere, bros. Before pros over on Twitch. Who knows when we're going to pop up over there. So drop a follow on the channel.
Mondo, what do you got going on, man?
Nothing.
Alrighty. Nothing. I don't think Tommy's got anything going on either. He's probably fucking himself, or I think that's what he says anyway.
Well, okay. I need to point this out. He was married and had 3 Star Wars posters up in his bedroom. The man's lucky he got anything at all. I'm just going to be honest.
The man's not even here and he's catching strays.
Poor Tommy. By the way, we just mentioned we heard us reference Geek Talk. It was Tommy and Tony who's in the chat that ran that show before we went live for the first time. So much appreciated. Hopefully you tune in for part 2 next week. You can check out the Overlook Drive-In tomorrow night on the channel. We're taking a look back at Silent Hill with Sean Bean. So be on the lookout for that. We'll see you next time. May the Force be with you.
I wonder if Vader's dick got burned on Mustafar.